Hi guys, tonight we're drifting into the entire history of sugar, the sweet force that shaped the world. Imagine your fingertips brushing a rough green stalk in warm grass, your mouth filling with a taste so bright it feels like sunlight has somehow become food. How did something so small, so ordinary on a kitchen spoon, help build empires, alter landscapes, change breakfasts, and quietly tug at the habits of billions? Strange, isn't it, that one little crystal can carry so much history? So, before you settle into the story, take a moment to like the video and subscribe and tell me in the comments where you're listening from and what your local time is. Because somewhere out there, someone is hearing this at midnight, someone at dawn, and someone is definitely pretending they will stay awake. Now, dim the lights and let yourself step into a world before sugar bowls, before candy shops, before white cubes wrapped in paper beside hotel coffee. You are walking through a landscape older than memory. The air is damp, green, and alive. Leaves rub softly against one another. Insects hum with the confidence of tiny landlords, and the soil beneath your bare feet feels warm from a sun that has only just lowered itself toward evening. There is no word for sugar yet. There is no trade route, no refinery, no plantation, no silver spoon. There is only hunger, curiosity, and the human talent for putting questionable things into the mouth and hoping for the best. At first, sweetness comes from wild places. You find it in ripe fruit hanging heavy from branches, in berries hidden among thorns, in dates softened by heat, and most wonderfully, in honey. Honey is older in the human story than cultivated sugar by an almost embarrassing margin. Long before people learned to grow cane or boil syrup, they were stealing from bees with the bravery of fools and the optimism of poets. You can almost hear the buzzing cloud above a hollow tree, feel the sticky comb tearing between your fingers, smell wax, smoke, bark, and flowers concentrated into gold. One mainstream fact sits quietly here. Like a stone at the start of a path, ancient humans valued honey across many early cultures, not only as food, but also as medicine, offering, preservative, and symbol. It appeared in Egyptian tombs, in Greek myth, in ritual, and in daily life wherever bees and people had the awkward arrangement of living near one another. You taste it now in your imagination, thick and floral, and it is easy to understand why people thought sweetness belonged near gods, healers, and celebrations. It made ordinary life feel briefly forgiven. But sugarcane is waiting in the humid distance. It does not yet arrive as the neat white sweetness you know. It begins as a tall grass, jointed and fibrous, with long blades that whisper when the wind moves through them. Its origins are usually placed in New Guinea and nearby regions of Southeast Asia, where people likely chewed the cane for its juice long before anyone thought of crystals. You lift a cut stalk, heavy and cool in your hand. Its skin is hard, waxy, and faintly dusty. When you bite or split it, the inside gives a wet crunch, and juice floods out, grassy, sweet, and startling. It must have seemed like a trick. Most grasses are not generous. They scratch your ankles, hide insects, and generally mind their own business. This one offers sweetness in its bones. No fruit skin, no thorny bush, no angry bees, just a stalk that stores sunlight as juice. Honestly, as discoveries go, humanity has done worse. You walk with early farmers who do not think of themselves as making history. They are simply noticing which plants are worth keeping close. They learn that sugarcane grows best in heat and moisture, that pieces of the stem can be planted again, that some stalks are sweeter than others. Selection begins quietly, without laboratories or textbooks. Hands choose, cut, replant, and carry. Generations pass, and the plant becomes more useful because people keep asking it, very politely in agricultural terms, to become sweeter around you. The evening smells of crushed leaves and wet earth. Smoke rises from a small fire. Someone is scraping fibres from cane. Someone else is chewing and laughing because the juice runs down the chin. Children learn the taste early. Elders know which stalks are best. Dogs, naturally, are interested in everything except the historical importance of the moment. A quirky little tidbit belongs here too. In some early traditions, sugar cane was not merely food. It wandered into stories of love, desire, and divine pleasure. In later Indian imagery, the god of love, Kama, is often shown with a bow made of sugarcane. That is wonderfully dramatic, isn't it? A weapon of sweetness, not iron, not horn, not polished wood, but a cane stalk, as though romance itself was sticky, fragrant, and slightly dangerous to the teeth. As you move through this early world, you notice that sweetness is rare enough to matter. Today, sweetness can be so common that it hides in places where nobody invited it. But here, each sweet taste is seasonal, local, and limited. Fruit ripens and vanishes. Honey must be found, fought for, or carefully tended. Cane must be cultivated in the right climate. Sweetness is not yet casual. It is an event. That rarity changes how people feel it. Your body recognizes sweetness quickly because it often signals energy. In a world of uncertain meals, that matters. The tongue becomes a kind of messenger, reporting that this taste may help you survive. But the mind does something more. It remembers. It gives sweetness emotion. It connects sugar's ancestors with comfort, reward, healing, hospitality, and perhaps a little mischief. You can feel the beginning of a pattern that will follow human societies for thousands of years. Sweetness is never just sweetness. It becomes meaning. Historians still argue whether the earliest domestication of sugarcane was a single clear event or a long, messy process across several islands and communities. That uncertainty is not a failure. It is part of the softness of deep history. Plants move with people. People move with storms, marriages, hunger, trade, and chance. A cutting carried in a canoe may leave no written record, but it can still change the taste of the future. You stand near the water now. The shore is darkening. Somewhere beyond the horizon, people will carry cane westward. It will travel slowly at first, passed from hand to hand, field to field, language to language. It will become known in India, praised in texts, pressed for juice, boiled, refined, taxed, blessed, stolen, and desired. But for now, it is still close to the earth. It is a plant among people who know it by touch rather than by empire. You run your palm along a cane leaf and feel its edge, fine and sharp. The night air grows cooler, frogs begin their patient singing, the fire crackles, and the sweet smell of plant juice lingers on fingers and lips. No one here imagines a world of sugar ships, royal banquets, factory chimneys, ration books, soda bottles, or birthday cakes bright with candles. No one imagines dentists sighing deeply in professional disappointment. The future is not yet visible. There is only the first wonder that nature has hidden delight inside bark, fruit, flower, and grass. You taste it, and for a quiet moment, the world feels kinder than it usually is. That is where the history of sugar begins, not with conquest or commerce, but with a human being pausing in the heat, chewing a stalk, and realizing that the earth can be unexpectedly sweet. You walk into a warmer, busier world, where sugarcane is no longer only a plant chewed in the shade. It has become something watched, tended, named, and slowly transformed by patient hands. The path beneath you is dry in places, muddy in others, and it leads through fields where cane rises taller than a person, its leaves whispering like soft paper in the wind. The air smells of river water, smoke, animal dung, and crushed green stalks. Somewhere nearby, a wooden press groans as it turns. Here, in ancient South Asia, sweetness begins to take on a more deliberate shape. India becomes one of the great early centres of sugarcane cultivation and sugar making. The plant thrives in heat, monsoon moisture, and river-fed plains. Farmers learn when to cut it, how to press it, how to boil the juice, and how to coax syrup into thicker forms. The process is slow, smoky, and sticky. Nothing about it feels like the clean white crystals in a modern bowl. This sweetness is brown, dense, fragrant, and alive with the taste of earth. You stand beside a boiling pan and feel heat press against your face. Cane juice bubbles and darkens. Steam rises in damp clouds, carrying a smell that is grassy, caramel-like, and faintly mineral. Someone skims foam from the surface with practiced calm. Someone else feeds the fire, the wood snapping in sharp little sighs. Your skin grows tacky from the air. Your hair smells of smoke. The whole place seems to breathe sweetness. A mainstream historical fact rests at the centre of this scene. Ancient India developed early methods for crystallizing sugar from cane juice, and Sanskrit terms connected to sugar and sugarcane helped shape words that travelled into other languages. The word shakara, meaning something like gravel or small particles, is often linked to later words for sugar. Language itself begins to carry sweetness outward, grain by grain, syllable by syllable. Very dramatic for a pantry item, but there we are. You notice how different this is from honey. Honey is gathered from bees, negotiated from the wild with smoke and nerve. Cane sugar can be planned, a field can be planted, a harvest can be expected. At least when rain and pests decide not to be difficult, which they often do, because agriculture enjoys keeping people humble. This makes sugar more reliable, and reliability changes everything. Sweetness can move from surprise to system. The people around you do not treat sugar as ordinary. It is precious, useful, and still limited. It appears in medicine, ritual, and elite food. In early medical traditions, sweet substances are associated with nourishment, balance, and strength. You may see sugar used in preparations meant to soothe the body, carry herbs, or make bitter ingredients less insulting to the tongue. Some things never change. Even ancient patients probably appreciated medicine that did not taste like punishment. You follow a healer into a shaded room where jars sit along a wall. The atmosphere is cooler here. The floor is smooth beneath your feet. Dried roots, seeds, resins, and powders release a complicated fragrance, bitter, floral, woody, and sharp. Sugar is not merely a treat in such a place. It is a carrier, a softener, a substance that helps medicine enter the body more gently. The healer's hand is steady as it measures. Outside, a cartwheel squeaks. Inside, sweetness becomes part of knowledge. A quirky tidbit glimmers in the lamplight. Ancient writers sometimes described sugar in ways that sound almost enchanted to modern ears. Greeks and Romans who heard of Indian sugar called it a kind of honey made from reeds, without bees. That phrase feels wonderfully confused and completely reasonable. Imagine being told that somewhere far away, people had found a reed that made honey by itself. You might nod politely while thinking, absolutely not, but please continue. Trade begins to carry this wonder across distance. You move with merchants along dusty roads and river routes, where goods travel in bundles, jars, sacks, and rumours. Cotton, spices, gems, aromatics, and ideas move together. Sugar, in its early solid forms, is easier to transport than fresh cane juice. It can be packed, weighed, stored, and gifted. It becomes a substance of exchange, something small enough to carry but special enough to impress. The road is never silent. Oxen snort. Bells clink from harnesses. Sandals slap against packed earth. At night, fires burn low and people speak in several languages around the same pot. You smell lentils, sweat, leather, and the faint sweetness of sugar wrapped carefully against damp. Traders know that luxury is not only about rarity, it is about distance. The farther something travels, the more imagination clings to it. Persia becomes another important stage in sugar's early expansion. There, cane cultivation and sugar processing are adapted, and refined in regions where irrigation can make dry landscapes bloom. You walk through gardens cut by channels of water, the liquid murmuring over stone. The Persian world has a deep talent for managed water, for turning harsh land into ordered green spaces. Cane needs thirst answered regularly, and irrigation answers with quiet discipline. You pass workers guiding water through narrow channels. Mud presses cool between toes. The sun is bright, almost metallic. In the distance, palms shimmer. A field of cane stands like a wall of green, improbable and demanding. Sugar is not an easy crop. It requires labour, fuel, land, skill, and timing. Its sweetness is born from effort, which is a polite way of saying that every pleasant spoonful has always had a very large hidden bill. Persian cooks and physicians value sugar. It appears in syrups, confections, preserves, and medicinal compounds. The idea of sweetness as refinement grows stronger. A sweetened preparation can signal sophistication, care, and access to long-distance knowledge. In elite settings, offering sugar is not just feeding someone. It is saying, look how far my household reaches, look how well my storerooms behave, yet much remains uncertain. Scholars still debate how quickly sugar-making techniques spread from India into Persia and surrounding regions, and whether certain refining methods were transferred through trade, migration, conquest, or quiet imitation. Written sources can be suggestive but slippery. A word may mean cane, syrup, crystals, or sweetness more generally. Archaeological traces are sometimes faint. History, like boiling syrup, thickens slowly and can scorch if handled too confidently. You linger near a workshop where syrup is cooling in shallow vessels. The surface shines dark amber. A worker breaks apart hardened sugar with a tool, and the pieces fall with a soft clatter. They are uneven, not the tidy cubes of polite tea tables. Some are grainy, some sticky, some flecked with molasses. You touch one and feel it cling to your fingertips. When you taste it, the flavour is deep and smoky, with the green memory of the cane still inside it. Around you, sugar is becoming a bridge between farm and pharmacy, kitchen and caravan, ritual and revenue. It is not yet everywhere. Most people still live without regular access to it. Their sweetness comes from fruit, dates, honey, milk, grain, and festival foods. But the idea of cane sugar has entered the human imagination. It can be made, it can be stored, it can travel, it can heal, impress, comfort, and tempt. Evening lowers itself over the fields. The cane leaves turn silver at their edges. Somewhere a flute plays a slow phrase, almost lost beneath the creak of carts and the murmur of water. You breathe in smoke, syrup, dust, and jasmine. The world feels both ancient and strangely familiar, because the desire is familiar. A little sweetness at the end of labour, a taste offered to a guest, a remedy made kinder, a luxury tucked away for someone important. You hold a small piece of early sugar in your palm. It is rough, brown, and imperfect. It carries sunlight, river water, firewood, human skill, and the patience of many seasons. It is not yet the ruler of diets or economies. It is still learning its power. But already, in these fields and workshops, sweetness has begun to move with language, medicine, trade, and status, and the world is quietly making room for it. You enter a city of sunlit walls, shaded courtyards, and water moving with quiet purpose. The streets are narrow enough for voices to soften as they pass between buildings, yet wide enough for merchants, donkeys, baskets, and opinions to squeeze through together. The air smells of dust, rosewater, warm bread, lamp oil, and something darker from a sugar workshop nearby, where cane juice is being boiled until it thickens into syrup. This is the medieval Islamic world, stretching across lands connected by faith, scholarship, conquest, commerce, and an impressive ability to improve whatever arrived in a basket. Sugarcane, already known in older centres of cultivation, now finds new gardens, new mills, new markets, and new meanings. You move through regions where Arabic-speaking administrators, Persian scientists, North African farmers, Jewish merchants, Indian traders, and many others share techniques, argue over prices, and leave behind traces of a sweeter world. A mainstream historical fact stands clearly here. From roughly the early medieval period onward, Islamic societies played a major role in spreading sugarcane cultivation and sugar refining across the Middle East, North Africa, Sicily, and parts of Spain. Irrigation systems, agricultural manuals, and skilled labour helped cane grow in places where water had to be guided carefully rather than simply hoped for from the sky. Sugar becomes not just a crop, but a craft. You walk beside an irrigation channel at dawn. Water slides over smooth stone with a cool, patient sound. Your hand dips into it and the chill surprises you. Around you, the air is still soft before the heat gathers strength. Cane fields rise in strips of green, their leaves clicking faintly against each other when the breeze comes through. Farmers inspect the channels, clearing silt, adjusting flow, making sure every thirsty row receives its share. Sugar is sweet, yes, but it's also very needy, like a royal guest who drinks the well dry and still expects dessert. In this world, agricultural knowledge is written down with care. Scholars and land managers describe soils, planting times, irrigation methods, and processing techniques. Their books are not sleepy little lists. They're evidence of close observation, of people noticing how plants behave when treated well or badly. Sugarcane rewards skill and punishes laziness. It demands heat, water, cutting, crushing, boiling, clarifying, cooling, and storing. You begin to understand that the history of sugar is also the history of organised labour, technical memory, and fire. The workshop pulls you inward. You hear the creak of a press, perhaps turned by animals walking in circles, their hooves scuffing packed earth. Cane stalks are fed between rollers or crushed by heavy mechanisms. Juice runs out, cloudy and greenish, into vessels waiting below. Workers move with rhythm, not haste. The smell is powerful, fresh-cut grass at first, then steam, then caramel, then smoke as the boiling deepens. Your face warms. Your palms grow sticky from touching a wooden rail polished by years of use. In refining, skill matters. Clarifying agents may be added. Foam is skimmed away. Syrup is transferred, reduced, and sometimes poured into moulds where crystals form and molasses drains off. The cleanest sugar is prized, but many grades exist. From coarse dark lumps to paler refined forms, nothing is wasted lightly. Syrups flavour medicines and drinks. Lower grades sweeten foods. The best pieces may travel far, wrapped and guarded like small treasures that happen to dissolve in tea, which is a strange destiny for treasure. You pass into a market where sugar appears among spices, perfumes, dried fruits, and medicines. Vendors call in voices trained by years of competition. Copper bowls catch the sunlight. Glass jars glow with syrups tinted red, amber, and gold. You smell musk, cinnamon, vinegar, sesame oil, and frying dough. A merchant offers candied seeds, almond confections, and small sweets perfumed with rose or orange blossom. Your fingers touch a sugared piece of fruit, slightly tacky on the outside, tender within. It tastes of preservation as much as pleasure. Here is a quirky tidbit to tuck under the pillow. Medieval physicians and cooks used sugar in syrups called sharab, a word connected to drinks and medicinal preparations. Over time, Through long linguistic wandering, related words helped give English syrup and sherbet. So the next time someone enjoys a sweet frozen dessert, there is a faint echo of pharmacies, gardens, and careful boiling pans behind it. Language has a habit of hiding entire caravans inside ordinary words. Sugar's role in medicine expands beautifully in this setting. It helps carry herbs, preserve fruits, soothe throats, and disguise bitterness. Physicians working within traditions influenced by Greek, Persian, Indian, and Arabic learning consider sweetness in relation to bodily balance and temperament. You sit in a cool room lined with jars while a physician mixes a preparation. Outside, a fountain murmurs. Inside, the air smells of dried mint, myrrh, sugar, and ink. The spoon taps the side of a ceramic cup, soft as a beetle against a wall. Hospitals and elite households may use sweet syrups with great seriousness. Confectionery and medicine are not cleanly separated. A sweetmeat might delight the tongue and support health. A syrup might comfort the sick and impress guests. Sugar stands with one foot in the kitchen and one in the clinic, which is quite flexible for something that began as a grass. In cities such as Baghdad, Cairo, Damascus, and later centres in Al-Andalus and Sicily, sugar moves through networks of learning and luxury. It is served at banquets, sent as a gift, prepared for festivals, and discussed in texts. Wealthy households experiment with sweet-shaped, coloured, and scented. The atmosphere around sugar becomes more refined, even theatrical. People do not merely eat it, they present it. Still, not everyone enjoys this sweetness. Cane cultivation requires heavy work. Fields must be planted and cut. Mills must run. Fires must be fed. In some regions, enslaved labour, tenant labour, and harsh rural obligations support production. Sugar's beauty sits beside discomfort, as it so often will. The fragrant syrup does not erase the aching shoulder, the blistered hand, or the long day under a white-hot sky. Researchers continue to disagree about how uniform sugar production really was across these Islamic regions. Some areas may have had large organised estates, while others relied on smaller plots, seasonal work, or mixed farming systems. The surviving records are uneven, and words used for workers, mills, and taxes do not always reveal the full human reality. History gives you enough to see the outline, but not always enough to hear every voice. Night settles over the city. Lamps glow behind screens. The market quiets, though not completely, because cities dislike going to bed when there is still gossip available. Somewhere, a cook pours syrup over pastries. Somewhere else, a scholar copies a line about cane cultivation by the light of a small flame. Water continues to move through channels beyond the walls, feeding fields that will become juice, syrup, crystals, medicine, gifts, taxes, and cravings. You hold a small cone of pale sugar in your hand. It feels hard, slightly rough, and precious. It has passed through fields, mills, boiling rooms, moulds, markets, and meanings. In this world of irrigation and scholarship, sweetness becomes a science, a luxury, and a form of power that can travel quietly in a pouch, gleam on a banquet tray, or dissolve into a cup before anyone fully understands what it is beginning to change. You step into Europe while the air is cool, damp and edged with wood smoke. The ground under your shoes is uneven stone, slick from mist and old rain. Bells sound somewhere above the rooftops, slow and heavy, spreading over a town of timbered houses, narrow alleys, and windows covered with horn or oiled cloth. The smell is not sweet at first. It is wool, mud, animals, onions, smoke, and the sharp breath of winter stored inside walls. Sugar is here, but only barely. It does not sit casually on tables. It does not wait beside porridge, nor disappear into the pockets of children. It arrives through trade, war, diplomacy, pilgrimage, and medicine, wrapped in mystery and expense. To many Europeans of the Middle Ages, sugar is not simply food. It belongs with spices, drugs, perfumes, and rare substances that seem to come from a warmer, cleverer, more fragrant world. It is weighed by apothecaries, guarded by merchants, and served by nobles who enjoy reminding everyone that they can afford things other people cannot pronounce. You walk into an apothecary's shop and the atmosphere changes. Outside, carts rattle and pigs complain in the street, because medieval pigs always seem to have strong opinions. Inside, the room is dim and orderly. Bundles of dried herbs hang from beams. Shelves hold jars of powders, seeds, gums, resins, and syrups. The air smells of sage, vinegar, beeswax, pepper, dried roses, and something faintly sweet from a locked chest. Your fingers brush the counter, polished smooth by generations of anxious customers. A mainstream historical fact sits plainly in this shop. In medieval Europe, sugar was often treated as a medicinal substance and luxury spice before it became an everyday food. Physicians and apothecaries used it in syrups, electuaries, lozenges, and preserved fruits. Because it was costly and imported, it belonged mostly to elite households, monasteries with resources, and urban medical trade. Sweetness had crossed into Europe, but it still wore expensive shoes. The apothecary lifts a small piece of sugar. It may be part of a cone or loaf, pale but not perfectly white, hard enough to scrape or chip. A knife presses against it with a dry click. A shaving falls like a tiny flake of stone. You place it on your tongue, and it melts slowly, first grainy, then bright. The taste is clean compared with honey, less floral, more direct. It feels almost icy in its clarity, though the room is warmed only by a sulking fire. For medieval diners, sugar's appeal is tangled with the era's taste for spices. Elite cooking often combines sweet, sour, and aromatic flavours in ways that may surprise a modern tongue. Meat can be served with fruit, wine, vinegar, cinnamon, ginger, cloves, and sugar. Sauces may be sharp, perfumed, and sweet all at once. You sit at a high table where candle flames lean in the draught and trenchers hold rich food. There is roasted meat beneath a sauce dark with spices. The smell is thick, warm, and luxurious. A servant sprinkles sugar over a dish as though adding powdered status. No one here thinks dessert must come last. That tidy little rule is not yet fully settled in. Sweetness moves through the meal more freely, wandering into sauces, drinks, medicines, and festive dishes like a guest who refuses assigned seating. Honestly, it has confidence. Sugar also begins to appear in courtly display. At grand feasts, wealthy hosts may offer elaborate edible sculptures made from sugar paste or marzipan. These creations can take the shape of castles, animals, saints, ships, coats of arms, or scenes designed to flatter powerful guests. The point is not simply to eat them. The point is to make people stare. You can almost hear the polite silence around a banquet table when a sugar castle arrives, followed by the careful murmurs of admiration from guests mentally calculating how much rent it represents. Here is a quirky tidbit worth savouring. Some medieval and early modern banquets featured subtleties, decorative dishes meant to surprise or instruct diners. Sugar, because it could be moulded, coloured, and shaped, became perfect for these edible performances. A sugar sculpture might carry a political message, celebrate a marriage, or announce that the host was very wealthy and possibly unbearable at parties. Sweetness had become theatrical. You wander through a merchant quarter near a port city. The wind carries the smell of tar, salt, wet rope, fish, and barrels. Ships bring goods from the Mediterranean world and beyond. Sugar may pass through Venice, Genoa, or other trading centres, arriving alongside spices, silk, alum, dyes, and medicines. Merchants record it in ledgers with careful numbers. Taxes follow it, naturally, because nothing delicious travels long before officials notice. In the counting house, the sound is quieter, quills scratch, coins clink, wax seals soften near a flame. Men discuss measures, spoilage, routes, credit, risk, and profit. Sugar is valuable because it is rare, but rarity depends on chains of movement. Growers, refiners, sailors, brokers, wholesalers, apothecaries, cooks, and nobles all touch its journey. Each hand adds cost, each mile adds desire. You can feel how Europe's hunger for luxury goods is widening. Pepper burns the tongue. Silk pleases the skin. Sugar delights the mouth and soothes the sick. These imported goods do more than decorate elite life. They teach consumers to want what is distant. They create habits of expectation. Once a noble household learns the charm of sweetened preserves, spiced wines, and sugared medicines, going back to plain severity feels rude. The tongue, once educated, becomes a terrible accountant. Yet sugar is still not common. In villages, ordinary people rely on local sweetness. Honey from hives, fruit from orchards, malted grains, and seasonal preserves continue to matter. A peasant child may never taste imported cane sugar at all. A labourer may see it only in a noble kitchen, a monastery infirmary, or a town market from a respectful distance. The gap between sugar as luxury and sugar as daily habit remains wide. Historians still argue about how quickly medieval Europeans understood sugar as food rather than medicine. Recipe books, medical texts, household accounts, and trade records all show sugar being used. But these sources come mostly from people with money, literacy, or institutions behind them. The lives of the poor leave fewer sweet traces. A kitchen account can tell you what a countess bought, but not what a hungry child imagined while smelling her feast from the courtyard. You walk through a monastery garden where frost silvering the leaves melts under pale morning sun. Monks tend herbs used for healing fennel, rue, sage, mint, and lavender. In the infirmary, sugar might be mixed with herbs or used to preserve fruit. The sound of chanting drifts faintly through stone corridors. The air is cold enough that your breath appears. A bowl of sweetened preparation rests near a sick bed, and for the patient, the taste may bring comfort as much as cure. Sugar's religious associations are subtle but present. Sweet foods appear during celebrations, fasting cycles, and elite gift exchanges. In Christian Europe, feast days punctuate a calendar often marked by scarcity and discipline. Sweetness becomes linked to special time, not ordinary time. It belongs to weddings, holy days, courtly hospitality, and the sick room. It is a small sign that life has briefly stepped outside its usual grey cloak. By candlelight, sugar looks almost magical. It gleams among darker foods, catches light on rough edges, and disappears when warmed. It is solid, then liquid, medicine, then treat, spice, then symbol. The uncertainty of its category gives it power. People are not sure whether to respect it, prescribe it, display it, or simply eat it. So, being human, they do all of these. The evening closes around the town. Rain begins tapping on shutters. In a noble kitchen, a cook scrapes sugar over a dish with careful economy. In an apothecary's shop, a locked chest is shut for the night. In a harbour warehouse, a merchant checks that no damp has reached the precious cargo. The sweetness in Europe remains scarce, expensive, and socially loud. It speaks softly on the tongue, but very loudly in the ledger. You hold one small shaving of sugar between finger and thumb. It feels dry, hard, and delicate. Around it gather physicians, merchants, cooks, nobles, monks, sailors, and patients. It is not yet democratic. It is not yet casual. It is a luxury crossing cold streets in tiny quantities, carrying with it the scent of faraway heat and the promise that Europe's appetite is only beginning to wake. You drift toward the Mediterranean, where islands rise from blue water like sun-warmed stones. The sea glitters under a hard, bright sky. Gulls cry above harbour walls, and waves slap softly against boats darkened by pitch. The air smells of salt, olives, fish, crushed herbs, and smoke from kitchens where garlic meets oil with a small hiss. It is a beautiful place to imagine falling asleep, which is slightly unfair, because the history unfolding here is not nearly as gentle as the view. Sugarcane has reached island worlds where climate, trade, and ambition begin to meet in a sharper way. Cyprus, Sicily, Crete, Malta, and other Mediterranean spaces become places where Europeans encounter not only sugar as a luxury, but sugar as a demanding agricultural system. Warm coasts and irrigated lowlands can support cane. Ports can send the finished product outward. Merchants can finance production. Lords can count profits. Workers can do the exhausting part. As usual, you walk inland from a harbour toward a cane field. The road is dusty, lined with dry grasses and low stone walls. Cicadas rasp in the heat with the commitment of tiny unpaid musicians. The cane stands green against a landscape of pale rock and silver olive leaves. It looks almost too lush, as if the plant has imported its own climate. Water trickles through channels cut with care, feeding rows that would fail without attention. A hand placed in that water feels cool and slippery, carrying bits of silt from higher ground. A mainstream historical fact rests in this island landscape. During the later medieval period, sugar production grew in parts of the Mediterranean, especially on islands such as Cyprus and Sicily, where cane was cultivated and processed for European markets. These places helped develop techniques, labour arrangements, and commercial habits that would later be expanded in harsher forms across the Atlantic. The island was a laboratory, though nobody put that on a cheerful sign by the road. At a mill, the sound changes. You hear wooden gears complain, animals breathing heavily as they circle, and cane cracking under pressure. Juice runs into tubs, cloudy and green. Workers move stalks in bundles, their arms scratched by leaves. The cut cane has a sharp, wet smell, like grass bruised under rain. Fires burn under boiling pans, and the air grows thick with steam. Sweat gathers behind the knees, along the neck, at the small of the back. Sugar's not delicate here. It is hot, rough, wet, and loud. The process needs fuel, and fuel means wood, brush, or other burnable material gathered from already fragile environments. Cane wants water, boiling wants heat, mills want maintenance, shipping wants barrels, rope, roads, and ports. You begin to feel how sugar changes more than taste. It reorganizes landscapes. It asks hillsides for timber, streams for flow, fields for space, animals for strength, and people for time. Such a polite little crystal, really. Once it reaches the table, very quiet about its demands. On Cyprus, sugar becomes connected with crusader states, noble estates, and Mediterranean trade networks. On Sicily, Muslim, Byzantine, Norman, and later rulers all leave layers of agricultural and administrative influence. This region is never simple. It is a crossroads where languages mingle, armies arrive inconveniently, and merchants somehow still find time to calculate margins. Sugar fits perfectly into this busy confusion, because it thrives when power, capital, and technical skill overlap. You step into a storehouse near the coast. It is dim and cooler than the yard. The walls smell of damp stone, molasses, straw, and old wood. Sugar may be stored in loaves or packed in forms that can travel. Some is pale and expensive. Some remains brown and sticky. Molasses clings to vessels with a dark shine. Touching a lump leaves grit on your fingertips. When you taste it, the flavour is smoky, mineral, and deep, less like pure sweetness than a memory of sun trapped in mud and fire. Here comes a quirky tidbit, small but revealing. In some medieval European kitchens, sugar was still grouped with spices, and spice boxes could hold it alongside ginger, cinnamon, cloves, and grains of paradise. Imagine sugar sitting there like the quiet cousin at a dramatic family dinner, not yet the star, but already being invited because everyone suspects it has money. Its identity remains flexible spice, medicine, preservative, decoration, and food all at once. The island plantations are not yet identical to later Atlantic plantations, but certain patterns appear. Land is concentrated, processing is centralized, labor is organized around a crop that must be cut and processed at the right time. Cane cannot be left politely waiting once harvested, because the sugar content begins to decline. The plant imposes urgency. It tells humans when to hurry. That urgency strengthens control, schedules, and discipline. Workers may include enslaved people, peasants, wage labourers, prisoners, migrants, or people bound by local obligations, depending on place and period. The categories shift, and the records are often frustrating. A document may list a sale, a tax, a mill, or an estate, while the aching bodies behind those words remain blurred. You see a worker rinsing sticky hands in a trough, shoulders bowed from lifting cane. Another coughs near the smoke. A child carries a bundle too large for comfort. History often records the sugar more carefully than the person who made it. Scholars still debate how directly Mediterranean sugar estates shaped the plantation model that later expanded across the Atlantic. Some see these islands as clear prototypes, with irrigation, mills, export agriculture, and coerced labour forming a recognisable pattern. Others warn that the comparison can be too neat, because local laws, scales of production, labour systems, and markets differed widely. The truth may be less tidy, which is rude of the past, but very typical. You sit for a while near the edge of a field as afternoon lengthens. The cane leaves hiss in the wind. A mule flicks its tail. The distant sea flashes between two hills. At first glance, the place looks peaceful, almost painted for a travel poster that wisely leaves out labour contracts. Yet the island is changing. Water is redirected. Mills are built. Ports grow busier. Merchants speak of sweetness in terms of weight, price, and credit. The crop draws the island into a wider hunger. Sugar also enters local foodways. Syrups sweeten pastries, preserved fruits travel in jars, almonds, honey, sesame, and spices meet cane sugar in kitchens that smell of warm dough and orange blossom. You enter one such kitchen in the evening. The stone floor is cool underfoot. A cook folds a sweet filling into pastry while oil shimmers in a pan. The first piece fries with a tender crackle. The scent rises rich and comforting, and for a moment the harder machinery of sugar disappears behind pleasure. That is one of sweetness's oldest tricks. It can make you forget the road it took to reach you. Night comes blue over the harbour. Ropes creak. A ship's lantern sways. Men load cargo while someone mutters about moisture, price, and the reliability of sailors, which apparently has never been perfect. Sugar leaves the island in compact forms, bound for elite tables and medical shops. It carries with it the hidden map of channels, fields, mills, fires, hands, and hillsides thinned for fuel. You stand by the water and feel salt drying on your skin. The island smells of seaweed, smoke, and syrup. Behind you, the fields fade into darkness. Ahead, ships wait under stars. Sugar has become more than a rare sweetness from distant lands. It is now a system that can settle into a place, reshape its land, organize its labor, and make merchants dream in columns of numbers. The Mediterranean has given sugar a new kind of body, not just a plant, not just a luxury, but a model of production with a quiet appetite of its own. You move west with the wind, out past the familiar edges of the Mediterranean and into the Atlantic, where the sea feels wider, darker, and less forgiving. The waves rise with a deep rolling sound, lifting the ship as if testing its courage. Salt gathers on your lips. Rope roughens your palms. The deck smells of tar, wet wood, stale water, sweat, and dried fish. Above you, gulls fade behind the mast, and ahead, islands wait like green sparks in a blue immensity. This is the age of Portuguese and Spanish expansion, when sugarcane begins to travel beyond old coastal worlds into Atlantic islands. Madeira, the Canary Islands, and São Tomé become crucial stepping stones. These islands are not empty in meaning or consequence. They are places of experiment, ambition, settlement, conflict, and environmental change. The crop that once needed irrigation channels and skilled mills now enters a new oceanic system, carried by sailors, investors, royal privileges, forced labour, and the enormous confidence of people who believed every horizon was a business opportunity. You arrive at Madeira, where steep slopes climb sharply from the sea, clouds cling to the mountains, and laurel forests breathe moisture into the air. The island smells of wet leaves, volcanic soil, salt spray, and fresh-cut wood. It is beautiful in the way places are beautiful just before humans start improving them with axes. Settlers clear land for wheat, vines, and cane. Terraces appear. Channels called levadas carry water from high, damp regions down toward fields that would otherwise thirst. A mainstream historical fact belongs here. Madeira became a major sugar producer in the 15th century, especially under Portuguese rule, and its sugar was exported to European markets. The island's success helped prove that Atlantic sugar could be profitable, and it attracted merchants from places such as Portugal, Genoa, and Flanders. Sugar was no longer only crossing seas as a luxury. It was beginning to make islands into engines of export. You walk beside a levada, listening to water run through a narrow stone channel. Ferns brush your legs, the path is slick, and the air feels cool against your face. Far below, cane fields catch the sun in bright strips. The water's murmur is gentle, almost sleepy, but its purpose is practical. It feeds profit. It feeds mills. It feeds a crop that turns mountain rainfall into European desire. At a mill near the coast, the work is intense. Cane arrives in bundles, leaves stripped, stalks heavy with juice. The mill may be powered by water, animals, or both, depending on place and design. You hear the grinding rhythm, the slap of stalks, the creak of beams, the call of overseers, the dull thud of containers being moved. The smell is layered green cane, hot syrup, smoke, oil, damp stone, and human exhaustion. Your skin feels coated by steam. Sugar seems soft only when it is far away. Madeiran sugar becomes famous enough to appear in European trade records and courtly consumption. It travels to Antwerp, Lisbon, and beyond. Merchants like it because it can be stored and sold in graded forms. Nobles like it because it tastes expensive. Cooks like it because it behaves well in sauces, preserves, and confections. Everyone who can profit from it likes it very much, which is a warning sign in history almost every time. From Madeira, you drift toward the Canary Islands, where conquest and colonization bring sugar into another contested landscape. The islands are home to indigenous Guanche communities whose lives are violently disrupted by European expansion. Land is seized. People are enslaved, converted, displaced, or absorbed into new colonial systems. Cane fields and mills take root among the consequences. The air here is drier in places, scented with dust, goats, sea wind, and the resin of tough plants clinging to volcanic ground. Sugar in the Canaries depends on labour as much as land. Enslaved Africans, indigenous islanders, and European settlers all appear within a changing and unequal society. The Atlantic sugar system is learning how to combine land seizure, coerced labour, irrigation, capital, and export. It is not yet the massive Caribbean machine, but the gears are becoming visible. You can hear them turning beneath the ocean wind. A quirky tidbit sits in the storerooms and ledgers. Sugar loaves were often shaped in moulds, producing cone-like forms that had to be broken with special tools in kitchens and shops. The neat little sugar cube is a much later convenience. For centuries, sweetness arrived as a hard cone, and somebody had to chip it apart. This makes the modern sugar packet look almost suspiciously lazy, as if it skipped all the drama. Now the journey carries you farther south, towards São Tomé, an island in the Gulf of Guinea. The air changes, grows heavy, wet, and intensely green. Rain darkens, leaves the size of shields. Insects sing in dense waves. The forest smells of fruit, rot, flowers, wet bark, and rich soil. Portuguese colonizers see in this island a place where cane can grow with frightening abundance. They also see distance, profit, and the possibility of controlling labour far from European eyes. São Tomé becomes one of the most important early Atlantic sugar colonies. By the 16th century, it develops plantation-style production using enslaved African labour on a significant scale. Mills and estates spread. Sugar leaves the island for European markets. The system becomes harsher, larger, and more dependent on violence. The sweetness made here carries the weight of captivity, resistance, disease, flight, and survival. You stand near a cane field at midday. Heat presses down like a hand. The leaves slice lightly at exposed skin. The ground is damp and mosquitoes drift in the shade. Workers cut cane with blades that flash in the sun, bundling stalks before the sugar within them declines. There is no romance in the timing. Cane demands speed, and plantation discipline turns that demand onto human bodies. The sound is steady, chop, rustle, breath, command, distant mill. Not all captives submit quietly. Some flee into forests and mountains, forming communities beyond plantation control. Some resist through work slowdowns, sabotage, negotiation, cultural survival, or the simple stubborn act of remaining human under conditions designed to deny it. The island's lush interior becomes shelter, danger, and possibility. You hear rain beginning in the canopy, first as scattered taps, then as a full soft roar. The field blurs behind silver water. Historians continue to dispute exactly how much São Tomé served as a direct blueprint for later American plantations. Many agree that it showed Europeans how profitable sugar could become when plantation agriculture, enslaved labour, and Atlantic shipping were fused together. Yet the specific connections are complex. People, capital, techniques, and violence moved through many routes. The past resists being folded into one tidy map, probably because tidy maps are often drawn by people who did not have to cut cane. As evening falls, a ship waits offshore. Barrels, crates, and sugar forms are prepared for loading. The harbour smells of mud, palm oil, salt, and molasses. Sailors shout over the slap of water against the hull. Somewhere beyond the darkening sea are Lisbon counting houses, Antwerp markets, royal treasuries, noble kitchens, and consumers who may never ask how sweetness was made. Distance becomes sugar's greatest disguise. You lean against a warm wooden post and feel the Atlantic breathing in the dark. Madeira's wet slopes, the Canaries' conquered fields, and São Tomé's humid plantations all belong to this widening pattern. Sugar has learned the ocean. It has found islands where land can be cleared, water managed, labour controlled, and ships loaded. It is no longer only a luxury passing through old trade routes. It is becoming an Atlantic force, carried by wind and hunger, making the sea itself taste faintly, troublingly sweet. You arrive in the Caribbean beneath a sky so bright it seems almost polished. The sea is blue beyond politeness, glowing in layers of turquoise, sapphire, and pale green where the reefs lie close to the surface. Warm wind moves over your face. It smells of salt, flowers, wet wood, and distant smoke. Palms lean over the shore with theatrical grace, as if they have been posing for travel posters centuries too early. Then you hear the cane. It is not loud at first, just a dry hiss as leaves slide against one another in the trade wind. Field after field rises behind the beaches, green and sharp-edged, replacing forest, garden, provision ground, and older ways of living. The Caribbean becomes one of sugar's most powerful theatres, where European empires turn islands into engines of wealth. Spain, England, France, the Netherlands, and Denmark all compete in different ways for land, labour, ports, and sugar profits. The result is a landscape both beautiful and deeply wounded. A mainstream historical fact stands at the centre of this world. By the 17th and 18th centuries, Caribbean sugar colonies such as Barbados, Jamaica, Saint-Domingue, Martinique, and Guadeloupe became major producers of cane sugar for European markets. Sugar plantations generated enormous wealth for colonial powers and helped transform Atlantic trade. Sweetness was no longer a rare luxury. It was becoming a mass craving, produced by an island machine built on land seizure and forced labour. You walk inland from a landing place. The road is pale with dust. Lizards flicker over stones. The heat rises from the ground and presses through your shoes. In the distance, a great house sits on a rise, white walls bright against the green. Lower down are the cane fields, boiling house, mill, workshops, animal pens, storage rooms, and the crowded quarters where enslaved people sleep after days shaped by command. The plantation is not just a farm, it is a whole system. Cane must be planted, weeded, cut, hauled, crushed, boiled, cured, packed, and shipped. Everything is arranged around timing. Once cane is cut, it must reach the mill quickly. Juice must be boiled before it spoils. Fires must be fed through long hours. A delay can mean loss. The crop imposes urgency, and planters impose that urgency on people. You stand near the mill yard. Oxen or horses move in circles, turning heavy rollers. In some places, windmills spin above the fields, their arms creaking against the sky. Later, water power and steam will add new force, but here the rhythm is already relentless. Cane stalks crack as they are crushed. Juice runs into channels. The smell is green and wet, then souring slightly in the heat. Flies gather. Workers shout over the noise. Inside the boiling house, the atmosphere is almost overwhelming. Heat wraps around you like a soaked blanket. Copper kettles hold cane juice at different stages, from thin liquid to thick syrup. Steam fogs the air. Smoke stings the eyes. Molasses, ash, sweat, and hot sugar blend into a smell that is both delicious and suffocating. A worker ladles liquid from one kettle to another with extreme care, because one wrong movement can burn skin badly. Sugar here is not a sprinkle. It is a furnace. A quirky tidbit hides among the tools. On many plantations, sugar making produced not only crystals but also molasses, and molasses became central to rum. Rum was sometimes used as a ration, a trade good, a naval drink, and a source of serious human foolishness. The sugar plantation, already intense enough, also helped create a world where sailors, soldiers, merchants, and tavern keepers developed very strong opinions about distilled cane spirits. History rarely misses a chance to complicate the beverage table. The Caribbean plantation changes the land with startling speed. Forests are cleared for cane and fuel, streams are diverted, soil is worked hard, imported animals trample paths into yards and roads, ports expand to handle sugar, rum, timber, foodstuffs, enslaved captives, and manufactured goods. Islands become connected to distant places in a tight economic web. A spoonful in London or Paris may depend on rain in Jamaica, credit in Amsterdam, iron tools from England, salt fish from Newfoundland, and the forced labour of Africans and their descendants. You pause beside a field at noon. The cane towers above you. Its leaves scrape your sleeves with a faint slicing sound. The smell is dry dust mixed with living green. An enslaved worker bends to cut stalks near the base. The blade moves with practiced efficiency. Cut cane falls in bundles, heavy and awkward. Another worker gathers and carries. The work is repetitive, urgent, and exhausting. The sun turns the air white. The human cost is immense. Enslaved Africans are transported across the Atlantic and forced into plantation labour under brutal conditions. Mortality rates in many sugar colonies are high, especially in the early years of settlement and during periods of intense production. Disease, overwork, punishment, malnutrition, and trauma shape daily life. Yet within these harsh systems, enslaved communities build families, languages, music, religion, foodways, and forms of memory. They are not simply victims inside ledgers. They are people making life where life has been made deliberately difficult. Planters often present themselves as managers of improvement and civilization, which is a bold claim from people whose business model depends on coercion. They write letters about yields, prices, weather, machinery, and discipline. They complain about costs. They worry about rebellion. They boast about refinement. Their records can be cold, but the landscape speaks more fully. A path worn between field and quarters, a garden patch beside a hut, a hidden drumbeat, a whispered prayer, a child learning a song in a language braided from several worlds. Historians still debate how much Caribbean sugar profits drove Europe's wider industrial and financial growth. Some argue sugar wealth was central to banks, ports, insurance, manufacturing, and empire. Others see it as one powerful factor among many in a larger transformation. The evidence is rich but difficult, because profits move through merchants, estates, debts, taxes, shipping, and reinvestment. Sugar's money did not always leave a clean trail. Money, like molasses, has a habit of sticking everywhere while pretending to be hard to trace. You enter a port town in the late afternoon. Barrels are rolled over planks with hollow thuds. Sugar hogsheads stand ready for shipment. Sailors call to one another. Merchants inspect cargo. The air smells of tar, salt, sweat, molasses, spices, and sewage, because history, despite its elegance in documentaries, often smells absolutely terrible. Taverns spill noise into the street. Counting houses glow with lamplight. A clerk writes numbers that flatten fields, bodies, storms, and hunger into neat columns of profit and loss. Across the island, wealth and fear grow together. Great houses rise with verandas, silver, imported furniture, and views over the very fields that make such comfort possible. Planters live surrounded by beauty and anxiety. They are outnumbered by the people they enslave. Laws harden, patrols watch, punishments are designed to terrify, resistance never disappears. It moves in quiet acts and open defiance, in broken tools, escaped journeys, preserved traditions, and plans spoken softly at night. As sunset spreads over the Caribbean, the cane fields turn bronze at the edges. Tree frogs begin their thin evening chorus. Smoke from the boiling house drifts low. Your shirt clings to your back. Somewhere, a pot simmers in the quarters, flavoured with provisions grown in spare time, on spare land, under not nearly enough rest. Somewhere else, sugar cools in moulds, ready to become cargo. You look toward the sea. Ships wait beyond the reef. Their sails pale against the darkening water. They will carry sweetness away from these islands, toward tables where it will seem clean, elegant, and innocent. But here, where cane cuts the skin and smoke stings the throat, sugar shows its hidden face. It is beauty and brutality pressed together, sunlight made profitable, pleasure built into a system that consumes land, forests, bodies, and time. Night settles warm and heavy. The cane keeps whispering in the dark. It sounds almost like rain, though no rain falls. It is the sound of a world being remade by appetite. You stand at the edge of an Atlantic port where the morning is grey, wet, and restless. Masts rise like a thin forest above the harbour. Ropes creak. Chains knock softly against wood. Waves slap the hulls of ships built for distance, profit, and denial. The air smells of salt, tar, bilge water, sweat, old fish, damp wool, and molasses leaking from barrels stacked near the quay. Here, sugar is no longer only an island crop or an expensive taste. It has become tied to one of the largest forced migrations in human history. European demand for sugar feeds a brutal system of capture, sale, transport, and enslavement. African men, women, and children are taken from many regions, moved through coastal forts and markets, packed into ships, and carried across the ocean into lives of coerced labour. The sweetness that reaches European cups is connected to fear, grief, endurance, and survival. A mainstream historical fact belongs at the centre of this dark harbour. The transatlantic slave trade forcibly transported more than 12 million Africans across the Atlantic between the 16th and 19th centuries, and sugar colonies were among the major destinations for enslaved labour. The numbers are enormous, but numbers can become strangely quiet. You have to bring them back into breath, footsteps, names, and hands. You walk past a warehouse where goods are being sorted. Cloth, metal bars, guns, alcohol, beads, cowries, and other trade items sit in bundles and crates. Merchants argue over prices with the calm voices of people who have trained themselves not to think too deeply. Ledgers turn human beings into entries. Ships carry manufactured goods to African coasts, captives to plantation colonies, and sugar, molasses, rum, and other products back toward Europe. This triangular pattern is never as neat as school diagrams suggest, but it helps reveal the shape of the machine. The sea wind touches your face, cool and damp. Somewhere nearby, a sailor laughs too loudly. Somewhere else, a captive waits in a space meant to erase comfort. Wood presses against skin. The smell is close, human, and sour. Voices speak in different languages, some praying, some whispering, some silent because silence is the only space left to control. You feel the ship move underfoot and understand how the ocean itself became a corridor of terror. Sugar helps make this system profitable. Cane fields require huge amounts of labour at planting, weeding, cutting, hauling, crushing, boiling, and packing. Plantation owners often calculate enslaved people as capital, which is a cold phrase for a violent idea. Human lives are bought, mortgaged, insured, punished, and replaced in pursuit of yield. The market for sweetness grows, and with it grows the demand for coerced labour. You enter an auction yard in a colonial town. The sun is harsh. Dust sticks to damp ankles. Voices rise and fall with a business-like rhythm that feels obscene because it is. Buyers inspect bodies as if examining tools or animals. Families may be separated by sale. Skills are noted. Age is guessed. Strength is priced. A child clutches a cloth edge. A woman stares beyond the crowd. Face unreadable. The atmosphere smells of rum, sweat, horse manure, hot wood, and fear, a quirky tidbit. If anything in this world can be called quirky without wincing, appears in the paperwork of empire. Ships, plantations, and even batches of sugar were sometimes given cheerful or elegant names that floated above the violence beneath them. Vessels involved in brutal commerce might carry names like hope, friendship, or liberty. History has a deeply uncomfortable talent for irony. It can paint a pleasant word on a door leading into suffering. On the plantation, enslaved people are forced into a rhythm shaped by cane. At harvest, Days stretch long. Cutters work through heat and sharp leaves. Cart drivers move loads toward the mill. Boiling houseworkers endure smoke, steam, and danger. Coopers make barrels. Carpenters repair machinery. Domestic workers maintain the planter household. Skilled enslaved workers may know metalwork, medicine, animal care, distilling, cooking, navigation, and languages. The system depends on knowledge it refuses to honour. You feel the ground vibrate faintly near the mill. The rollers turn, cane stalks crack and flatten. Juice runs pale and cloudy, then moves toward fire. The boiling house breathes heat through open doors. A worker's shirt clings to the body. Another wipes syrup from a hand before it hardens. Outside, flies gather where cane trash rots. Inside, the smell is heavy, sweet, smoky, and almost nauseating. Sugar is being made, and everything about it costs more than the buyer will ever see. Enslaved communities create lives under extreme constraint. They grow food in provision grounds when allowed, trade in local markets, keep spiritual practices alive, form kinship ties, tell stories, sing, mourn, heal, and resist. A night gathering may carry drums, clapping, low voices, and the smell of stewed roots or roasted plantain. A whispered memory of a homeland may survive in a word, a rhythm, a cooking method, a funeral practice, a charm tied in cloth. Resistance takes many forms. Some people run away into forests, mountains, and swamps. Some form maroon communities, defending freedom in difficult terrain. Some break tools, slow work, fake illness, steal time, preserve forbidden customs, or join organized revolts. Not every act looks dramatic from a distance, but inside a system built to control every hour, even a hidden garden, a secret meeting, or a name kept alive can become defiance. Historians still argue over whether sugar was the single most important driver of the slave trade, or whether it should be understood alongside tobacco, rice, cotton, mining, domestic labour, military demand, and wider imperial competition. The uncertainty matters because no single crop explains the whole horror. Yet sugar's role is undeniable. Its labour demands profitability, and popularity made it one of the great engines pulling people across the Atlantic against their will. You sit near the shore at dusk. The tide slides over stones with a soft, indifferent sound. A ship moves out beyond the harbour mouth, sails dark against a violet sky. Somewhere in its hold, cargo is counted. Somewhere on land, cane fields wait for the next day's labour. Somewhere far away, a sweetened drink will be served in a porcelain cup by candlelight, its surface calm, its history invisible. But here, you do not let the sweetness become innocent. You listen to the creak of ships and the breath of people forced into their shadows. You smell molasses and salt. You feel rough rope fibres against your palm. Sugar's power is not only in taste, but in the systems built to satisfy that taste. It can sit quietly on a table, white and delicate, while carrying the memory of storms, chains, markets, fields, songs, rebellions, and laves that refuse to vanish. Night deepens over the harbour. Lanterns tremble in the wind. The water keeps moving, dark and patient. Somewhere, a bell sounds from a ship, and the note fades slowly into the vast Atlantic air. You sit in a quiet European room where rain taps gently against the window panes. The glass is uneven, slightly green at the edges, and the world beyond it blurs into chimneys, wet roofs, and narrow streets shining under a grey afternoon. A fire mutters in the hearth. The air smells of coal smoke, damp wool, polished wood, and something new rising from a porcelain cup tea, dark and fragrant, waiting for sugar. The cup is small, almost delicate enough to feel nervous in your hand. You lift it carefully. Steam touches your face. The drink is bitter, earthy, and floral. Then a lump of sugar drops in with a soft clink. You stir, and the spoon makes a tiny silver circle against the cup. The bitterness softens. The warmth becomes friendlier. Suddenly the drink seems less like medicine and more like comfort. This is how habits begin, not always with thunder, but with a spoon tapping porcelain in a dim room. A mainstream historical fact rests in this domestic scene. In the 17th and 18th centuries, tea, coffee, and chocolate became increasingly popular in Europe, and sugar helped make these bitter drinks more appealing to many consumers. These beverages came through global trade networks, and their rise helped normalize sugar as part of daily life among growing urban and middle-class households. Sugar moved from rare display into routine pleasure, one cup at a time. You walk into a coffeehouse in London, Amsterdam, Paris, or another busy city of commerce and conversation. The floor is gritty beneath your shoes. Newspapers lie folded on tables. Men argue about politics, shipping, science, insurance, theatre, and the weather, because apparently the weather has always needed a committee. Cups clatter, pipes smoke. Coffee fills the room with a roasted, bitter smell, deep and almost burnt. Sugar waits nearby, ready to tame it. Coffee houses become social engines. Merchants gather information. Writers trade gossip. Investors listen for rumours that may become money. Some houses are linked to newspapers, stock dealing, auctions, and shipping news. The drink keeps people alert, and sugar makes alertness more pleasant. You take a sip, sharp coffee first, then sweetness spreading along the tongue. It is energy dressed in politeness. Tea offers a different atmosphere. You enter a sitting room where curtains filter pale light. A kettle sings. Porcelain cups are arranged with careful grace. Tea arrives through long routes involving Chinese growers, Asian ports, European trading companies. Silver flows, imperial pressure, and very serious arguments about manners. Sugar joins it at the table and changes the experience. Bitterness becomes balanced. A social ritual becomes sweeter, literally and symbolically. Chocolatey too enters European life after crossing from the Americas through Spanish and wider European contact. At first, it is usually a drink rather than a solid bar. It can be mixed with sugar, spices, milk, or water, depending on custom and wealth. You stand in a warm room where chocolate is being frothed. The smell is rich, earthy, and almost smoky. A wooden whisk turns, and foam gathers on the surface. Sugar makes cacao more familiar to European tastes, smoothing its intensity into luxury. A quirky tidbit appears at the tea table. Early European sugar consumers often used sugar nippers to break pieces from hard loaves. These tools looked a bit like small metal pliers, and they could be strong, practical, and slightly menacing. Imagine a polite hostess offering tea while casually cracking sugar like a tiny blacksmith. The modern spoonful has none of that drama, which is probably healthier for the furniture. As sugar joins hot drinks, it begins to shape time itself: morning coffee, afternoon tea, chocolate for special occasions. Sweetened drinks create pauses in the day, moments when people gather, rest, gossip, negotiate, flirt, or pretend not to listen. In busy cities, these rituals become social glue. You can feel the rhythm pour, sweeten, stir, sip, speak. Repeat until empire becomes paperwork and paperwork becomes someone else's problem. The rise of sweetened beverages also changes bodies and expectations. A taste once linked to medicine and status becomes increasingly normal for those who can afford it. Sweetness no longer has to wait for a feast. It can enter ordinary afternoons. This is a quiet revolution. The tongue learns to expect sugar not as a miracle, but as a companion. Desire becomes scheduled. You move through a market street where tea, coffee, chocolate, and sugar are sold near one another. The smell is extraordinary roasted beans, damp tea leaves, spices, dried fruit, tobacco, leather, and horse traffic making its own historical contribution. Unfortunately, shopkeepers weigh goods with brass scales. Customers ask questions about quality and origin. Packages rustle. Coins change hands. Sugar sits among global commodities, each one carrying distant labour into local habit. These drinks also become markers of class and identity. To serve sweetened tea in a respectable household is to show taste, access, and order. To drink coffee in a public house is to participate in urban conversation. To serve chocolate may signal luxury, fashion, or continental sophistication. Sugar supports all these performances. It is small but socially ambitious, which is a dangerous personality type even in crystal form. Women's relationship to sugar and tea grows especially important in some households. Tea tables become spaces of sociability, hosting, family management, and polite conversation. Men may dominate the coffee house in many cities, but tea often settles into domestic rooms where women shape rituals of serving and receiving guests. The sounds are soft to hear: the rustle of skirts, the click of china, the low murmur of voices, the spoon against the saucer. Yet the comfort of the cup depends on violence and inequality elsewhere. The sugar stirred into tea may come from Caribbean plantations. The tea may arrive through powerful trading companies. The chocolate may carry the consequences of colonial extraction. The coffee may be tied to enslaved or coerced labour in different regions. The room feels peaceful, but the cup is crowded with hidden histories. It is a very small object with far too many people inside it. Researchers continue to debate how quickly sugar became a daily necessity, rather than an occasional luxury among ordinary Europeans. Household accounts, tax records, shop inventories, and recipe books suggest rising consumption, but the pace varied by region, class, city, and century. Some families sweetened drinks regularly, others treated sugar as a precious extra. The story is not a straight line. It is a slow seep, like syrup spreading across a plate. You take another sip of sweetened tea, outside, cartwheels hiss through rain, inside, the fire settles into red coals. The drink warms your hands through the cup. You understand why people return to it again and again. It soothed bitterness, sharpened conversation, softened fatigue, and gave structure to long days. It made global trade feel intimate. It turned empire into an afternoon habit. Evening gathers at the window. A servant removes cups from a table. In a coffee house, candles burn low over stained newspapers. In a chocolate room, the last foam clings to the side of a cup. Sugar has slipped into daily rituals through bitterness, warmth, and sociability. It no longer needs to dazzle as a rare sculpture or sit behind a locked apothecary chest. It can dissolve quietly, disappear completely, and still change everything. You walk through the gates of a great estate on a soft morning, where mist lies low over the lawns and the gravel path crunches beneath your shoes. The house ahead is wide, pale, and proud, with tall windows catching the first light. Smoke rises neatly from chimneys. Somewhere behind the building, a kitchen fire has already begun its work. The air smells of wet grass, horses, beeswax polish, and breakfast bread warming in an oven. This is the world of sugar wealth brought home. Far from the cane fields, far from the boiling houses, the profits of sweetness settle into stone, silver, paintings, gardens, townhouses, banks, marriages, and parliamentary seats. Sugar planters, merchants, refiners, ship owners, insurers, and investors become some of the most powerful figures in Atlantic society. The crop grows overseas, but its money blooms in Europe with remarkable enthusiasm, like a vine that has discovered legal paperwork. A mainstream historical fact stands clearly in this grand hallway. In the 17th and 18th centuries, wealth from Caribbean sugar helped enrich European merchants and plantation owners, especially in port cities such as London, Bristol, Liverpool, Nantes, Bordeaux, Amsterdam, and Lisbon. These cities handled shipping, credit, insurance, refining, and sales. Sugar did not simply sweeten food, it helped sweeten balance sheets, and those tend to attract very serious people in very serious coats. You enter a drawing room where the curtains are heavy and the carpet muffles your steps. Portraits stare down from the walls with the calm confidence of people who know their descendants will inherit furniture. A silver sugar bowl sits on a side table, bright as a small moon. Its polished surface reflects candlelight, porcelain cups, and the hand of someone lifting tongs with elegant precision. The room smells of wax, tea, wool, perfume, and faint tobacco from a visitor who's been politely tolerated. The sugar aristocrat may be a planter who spent years in the Caribbean, or someone who never touched a cane stalk but owned land, shares, debts, or ships. Absence is part of the story. Many investors live far from the plantations that enrich them. They receive reports about rainfall, harvests, disease, markets, and enslaved labour as lines in a letter. Distance makes cruelty easier to dress in polite language. A bad season becomes a financial inconvenience. A rebellion becomes a security concern. A death becomes a loss of property in a ledger that should be ashamed of itself, if ledgers had manners. You follow a steward into an office where account books lie open. Quills rest beside ink. Sand is scattered to dry fresh writing. The smell is dry paper, leather, dust, and sealing wax. Columns of numbers record shipments, debts, tools, livestock, wages, taxes, and human beings assign prices. Sugar wealth depends on calculation. Every barrel has a cost. Every delay has a penalty. Every luxury upstairs is connected to discipline somewhere else. Ports grow rich from this traffic. You walk into a merchant quarter where warehouse doors stand open to the street. Barrels of sugar, rum, and molasses are stacked beside crates of cloth, iron tools, ceramics, and imported luxuries. Horses strain against carts. Dock workers shout. The harbour smells of salt, tar, river mud, sweat, spilled syrup, and smoke. Counting houses line the streets, their windows full of clerks making wealth look boring, which is perhaps its greatest disguise. Insurance and credit become essential. A planter may borrow money against a future crop. A merchant may finance a voyage. A ship may be insured against loss. A refinery may depend on steady supplies. Banks, brokers, and investors knit the whole system together. Sugar becomes part of an Atlantic financial web, moving not only as cargo but as promises, debts, bills of exchange, and risk. The sweet force is no longer only physical, it is abstract, written in ink, and therefore somehow even more slippery. A quirky tidbit shines from the dining room. Wealthy families sometimes displayed sugar in ornate centerpieces or served it in specialized silverware, including sugar casters, tongs, baskets, and bowls. A household could perform refinement through the handling of sweetness. Imagine needing multiple expensive objects just to manage tiny crystals. Humanity looked at sugar and thought, yes, delicious, but what it really needs is accessories. Great houses built or improved with plantation money often imitate older aristocratic styles. Columns, landscaped gardens, libraries, and portraits help new wealth appear ancient. The message is simple. This fortune may have come from trade, but please admire the driveway as if it descended from the Romans. You walk through a garden where paths curve around clipped hedges and ornamental ponds. The grass is cool under the morning dew. Birds call from carefully arranged trees. Nature here has been trained to look effortless, which takes a great deal of effort. Naturally, sugar money also enters politics. Plantation interests lobby for favourable duties, military protection, trade regulations, and compensation when policies threaten their wealth. In Britain and France, colonial planters and merchants can form powerful groups that defend slavery and sugar profits with polished arguments. They speak of property, commerce, national interest, and stability. It sounds respectable until you notice what has been left outside the sentence. Scholars still debate how much sugar wealth reshaped elite culture compared with other sources such as land rents, banking, textiles, tobacco, and government finance. Some estates and fortunes were deeply tied to sugar, while others only brushed against it through marriage, investment, trade, or credit. The influence is not always easy to measure. Money moves through families like a scent through fabric. Lingering even when the original room has been redecorated, you sit at a breakfast table where everything appears calm, china gleams, toast cools in a rack, tea steams from a pot wrapped in quilted cloth, sugar rests nearby, broken from a loaf, ready to dissolve. Outside the window, gardeners trim hedges. Inside, a guest compliments the marmalade. The softness of the scene is real, comfort is real, but it's not innocent. It has been purchased through systems that keep their hardest sounds far away. Refineries form another layer of sugar wealth. In European cities, raw sugar is processed into whiter, cleaner, more desirable forms. You enter a refinery where heat and labour fill the building. The air smells of lime, charcoal, syrup, smoke, and damp sugar. Workers pour, filter, mould, drain, and dry. Loaves stand in rows like pale cones. The work requires skill and strength. Refined sugar brings higher prices and urban employment, while also feeding the growing demand for sweetness among households that want purity to match politeness. By evening, the great house glows with lamplight. Guests arrive by carriage. Wheels grind softly over gravel. Horses snort clouds into the cool air. Inside, music begins in a room hung with mirrors. A dessert course may include preserves, jellies, sweet creams, cakes, fruits glazed with sugar, and sculpted decorations designed to impress. Laughter rises, glasses chime. The sugar aristocrats move gracefully through their rooms, wrapped in silk, credit, and selective memory. You stand near the silver bowl again. A hand lifts a piece of sugar and lets it fall into tea. It disappears without a trace, changing the drink while leaving the surface smooth. That is the talent of sugar wealth too. It dissolves into buildings, manners, family names, city streets, paintings, and institutions. It becomes heritage. It becomes taste. It becomes a quiet sweetness in the story a society tells about itself, while the bitterness remains hidden in the bottom of the cup. You enter the cane fields at night, when the heat has loosened its grip but not vanished. The air is still warm against your skin, heavy with the smell of crushed leaves, damp soil, wood smoke, and molasses. Above you, the stars are sharp and crowded. Around you, cane leaves whisper in the darkness, brushing one another with a dry, secretive sound. It is the hour when the plantation tries to sleep, but the people held inside it do not surrender their minds to silence. In the quarters, low fires glow red, pots simmer with provisions grown in small patches of stolen time yams, plantains, beans, cassava, maize, peppers, greens. Smoke curls under the thatch and escapes through gaps. A child coughs softly. Someone sharpens a tool. Someone hums a tune that carries pieces of several homelands and something entirely new. The atmosphere is tired, but not empty. It is full of memory, strategy, grief, humour, and the stubborn work of being alive. A mainstream historical fact belongs here. Enslaved people on sugar plantations resisted slavery in many ways, from everyday acts such as slowing work, breaking tools, stealing food, preserving culture, and forming families, to running away, building maroon communities, and joining organised revolts. Resistance was not only the dramatic moment of open rebellion, it lived in ordinary gestures too. The small refusals that made domination less complete than planters wanted to believe. You walk with someone along the edge of a provision ground. The soil feels uneven beneath your feet. Leaves wet with dew brush your ankles. This small plot may be one of the few places where enslaved families can grow food for themselves, trade at a local market, or maintain culinary traditions. The garden is practical, yes, but also emotional. Seeds carry memory. A pepper plant can become a kind of archive. A cooking method can cross an ocean and survive where books were denied. The sound of a drum travels faintly from somewhere deeper in the night. Not every colony permits drums. Some authorities fear them, and with reason. Drums can gather people. They can send signals. They can keep rhythms older than the plantation and build new ones born in the Americas. When drums are banned, rhythm moves elsewhere into clapping, feet, work songs, hand games, church responses, whispered chants, the knock of tools, the pulse of language. Control tries to silence culture, and culture, being rude in the best possible way, finds another door. You sit near a doorway where elders speak quietly. Their stories may include African spirits, Christian saints, animal tricksters, ancestral warnings, and local plantation gossip, which is sometimes the most powerful magic of all. These stories comfort, teach, and disguise criticism. A rabbit, spider, or clever small creature may outwit a stronger enemy. That is not just entertainment, it is a lesson in survival. When direct speech is dangerous, a story can carry a blade hidden in a feather pillow. A quirky tidbit appears in the world of naming and language. On many plantations, enslaved people were assigned European names by owners, yet communities often used alternative names, nicknames, African names, or titles known only among themselves. A person might be Tom in a ledger and someone entirely different by the fire at night. That double naming matters. It means the record does not own the whole person, no matter how confidently it writes. Escape is one of the clearest forms of resistance. You move through a forest path before dawn, where roots twist across the ground and wet leaves slap against your arms. The air smells of mud, flowers, rotting fruit, and fear sharpened into attention. Behind you are fields, patrols, dogs, and punishment. Ahead may be mountains, swamp, hunger, hidden communities, or capture. Every step is a calculation. Every snapped twig sounds too loud. Maroon communities form in many parts of the Caribbean and the Americas, especially in difficult terrain where colonial power is harder to reach. Jamaica's mountainous interior, Suriname's forests, and other regions shelter communities of people who escaped slavery and defended their freedom. These settlements can farm, trade, raid plantations, preserve African-influenced political structures, negotiate treaties, and create new societies under constant threat. Freedom here is not abstract. It is built from footpaths, watch posts, crops, weapons, rituals, and courage. In the daylight, resistance can look smaller but still matter. A worker may dull a blade, lose a tool, misunderstand an order with perfect innocence. Work slowly enough to reduce output but not so slowly as to invite immediate punishment. Food may be taken from stores. Animals may be released. Fires may begin mysteriously. Songs may mock the overseer in words he cannot fully understand. Planters complain constantly about theft, laziness, insolence, and superstition, which often tells you less about enslaved people and more about planter paranoia with very bad handwriting. You stand in a boiling house where the day's labour has resumed. Heat strikes your face. Syrup bubbles in copper pans. The sound is thick and wet, broken by the scrape of ladles. A skilled worker knows the exact moment when the syrup has reached the right point. This knowledge is valuable and sometimes dangerous. Plantations depend on enslaved expertise. Blacksmiths, boilers, carpenters, drivers, healers, Midwives and distillers hold knowledge that owners need but do not truly respect. Dependence creates small zones of leverage, not freedom, but leverage. Healing itself can be resistance. You enter a hut where herbs hang from the rafters. The room smells of bitter leaves, smoke, clay, and warm bodies. A healer prepares a wash, a tea, or a poultice using knowledge drawn from African, indigenous, and European traditions. Such healing can help bodies survive brutal labour. It can also preserve spiritual authority outside planter control. The person who knows plants may also know secrets, births, illnesses, fears, and plans. Historians still argue about how to interpret the balance between accommodation and resistance in plantation life. Some emphasize the constant presence of rebellion and refusal, while others warn that survival often required compromise, negotiation, and painful choices within extreme constraint. The debate matters because enslaved people were not symbols. They were human beings making decisions under pressure no comfortable observer should judge too easily. Sometimes endurance itself was the only available victory. Religious life offers another space of strength. African cosmologies, Christianity, Islam, and indigenous influences mix in different ways across regions. Ceremonies may happen in hidden places, in plain sight under approved forms, or in gatherings that look harmless to outsiders. You hear a hymn that carries another rhythm underneath it. You see hands moving in a gesture that means more than the overseer knows. Faith can console, organize, and encode memory. Markets also create openings. In some colonies, enslaved people sell surplus produce, fish, crafts, or goods on designated days. These markets allow movement, exchange, news, courtship, and small earnings. You walk through one as morning brightens. The air smells of peppers, fruit, tobacco, sweat, fried cakes, and damp baskets. Voices rise in many accents. Coins pass hand to hand. People trade not only food but information: who is ill, who has run, who plans to marry, which estate is nervous, which ship has arrived. Then there are rebellions, moments when hidden anger becomes collective action. Plots can be carefully planned or suddenly ignited. They may aim to seize weapons, burn cane, kill overseers, escape to maroon settlements, or overthrow colonial rule. Many are betrayed or crushed. But fear of rebellion haunts plantation societies because enslaved people vastly outnumber the free in many sugar colonies. The great houses glow at night with lamps, but anxiety sits inside them like a spider. As evening returns, you stand again among the cane. The leaves rustle in a wind that smells of rain. Far off, thunder rolls over the hills. The plantation wants to be a machine, measuring bodies by labour and time, yet everywhere inside it, people create meanings the machine cannot fully digest. A song, a garden, a hidden name, a path through trees, a child taught to remember, a tool misplaced at exactly the wrong moment. The sweetness made here travels away, but the resistance stays rooted in the soil. It moves through families, food, music, religion, language, and stories told softly beneath the noise of empire. You listen as the first rain begins to fall, tapping cane leaves, roofs, and cooling earth. It is a gentle sound, almost like applause too quiet to be noticed by those who only read the ledgers. You move into Saint-Domingue at the end of a humid day, when the mountains turn purple and the cane fields hold the last heat of the sun. The air feels thick on your skin. It smells of wet leaves, horse sweat, smoke, and syrup cooling somewhere in a distant boiling house. Cicadas call from the trees. A drumbeat moves faintly through the darkening plain, steady enough to feel like a second pulse beneath the ground. This colony, on the western part of the island of Hispaniola, becomes the richest sugar-producing colony in the world during the 18th century. It is ruled by France, worked by hundreds of thousands of enslaved Africans and their descendants, and admired by European merchants for its astonishing output of sugar, coffee, indigo, and cotton. Admired, that is, by people with a remarkable talent for admiring profits while ignoring the screams under them. Saint-Domingue is wealth built on terror, and everyone living there knows the ground is not still. A mainstream historical fact anchors this landscape. The Haitian Revolution, beginning in 1791, was the largest successful revolt by enslaved people in the Atlantic world, and it led to the creation of independent Haiti in 1804. It shattered the most profitable sugar colony of its age and forced empires to confront a truth they had tried very hard not to hear. Enslaved people were not property accepting fate, but human beings capable of remaking history. You walk through a plantation yard before the uprising. The mill stands quiet for the moment, but the tools are ready. Cane knives lean against a wall. Carts wait beside the field. The great house sits above the works, lit by lanterns, while the quarters spread below in dimmer light. The social order appears carefully arranged, yet it is full of fractures. White planters resent royal interference. Poor whites resent wealthy whites. Free people of colour demand rights and recognition. Enslaved people resist in countless ways. The colony is a room full of candles, and everyone keeps pretending the curtains are not flammable. News from France crosses the ocean in papers, letters, rumours, and arguments. The French Revolution speaks of liberty, rights, citizenship, and equality. Those words arrive in Saint-Domingue and do not behave politely. White colonists use them for their own interests. Free people of colour invoke them against racial discrimination. Enslaved people hear them and measure them against their own lives. Liberty, once spoken aloud, is difficult to lock back in a drawer. You stand near a nighttime gathering in the northern plain. Rain has recently passed, and the soil smells dark and alive. Trees drip softly. People gather in secrecy, carrying memory, faith, fear, and resolve. Religious ceremony and political planning are often linked in accounts of the revolution's beginning, especially around the famous gathering at Bois Caïman. The exact details remain debated, but the symbolic power is enormous. In the darkness, under leaves slick with rain, a colonized world listens to itself breathe. A quirky tidbit rests inside the language of revolution. Some French observers, trying to describe events they did not fully understand, filled their reports with rumours about drums, oaths, fires, charms, and mysterious leaders. Their fear made them imaginative, which is not the same as accurate. Colonial panic has always been a poor historian, but an excellent producer of dramatic paperwork. When revolt begins, cane fields burn. The sound is not like a fireplace. It is a rushing, crackling roar as dry leaves catch and flames move quickly through rows. Smoke rolls into the night, bitter and sweet at once. The smell of burning cane is thick, grassy, and sharp, carrying sparks into the dark. To planters, the fire is ruin. To the rebels, it can be signal, weapon, and declaration. The crop that consumed their labour becomes fuel for rebellion. You move along a road where people are gathering with tools, muskets, blades, and whatever weapons can be found. Horses rear, bells ring in alarm. Plantation buildings burn in the distance. The colony's wealth, so carefully counted in sugar barrels and export figures, suddenly seems fragile. The cane fields had looked orderly from the great house veranda. Now they are corridors of movement, hiding places, and lines of attack. The struggle becomes long, complicated, and extraordinarily difficult. Leaders rise from different backgrounds, including Toussaint Louverture, Jean-Jacques Dessalines, Henri Christophe, and many others whose names are less widely remembered but whose actions matter deeply. Armies shift alliances. France, Spain, and Britain all become entangled. The revolutionary forces fight not only for survival, but against attempts to restore slavery, disease, terrain, military strategy, and political negotiation all shape the outcome. You stand in the mountains, where the air is cooler and the smell of pine mixes with damp earth. Paths climb through mist. Fighters use the landscape to their advantage, moving through difficult terrain that European armies struggle to control. Boots slip on wet stone. Muskets are heavy. Hunger gnaws. Yet the mountains offer distance from the plantation plain, and distance can become power. Freedom often begins as a path other people cannot easily follow. Historians still argue over how to weigh the forces behind the Haitian Revolution. Some emphasize the ideals of the French Revolution. Some stress African military and political traditions. Some focus on plantation brutality, demographic imbalance, free people of colour, imperial rivalry, or the spiritual life of enslaved communities. The revolution contains all of these and more. It is too large to fit inside one explanation, which is inconvenient for tidy textbooks and very respectful of reality. As the war continues, sugar production collapses in many areas, mills are destroyed, fields are abandoned or fought over, trade is disrupted. European consumers feel the shock through prices and supply. Other colonies watch with fear and opportunity. Planters elsewhere strengthen repression, while abolitionists see proof that slavery is neither natural nor secure. The world of sugar has been cracked open by the people it tried to crush. In 1804, Haiti declares independence. The name itself reaches back to indigenous Taino roots, rejecting the colonial label of Saint-Domingue. The new nation stands as a symbol of black freedom and anti-slavery revolution, but it faces isolation, debt, hostility, and punishment from slaveholding powers terrified by its example. The sugar empire does not simply bow and apologize. Of course, empires are rarely that emotionally mature. You stand at dawn over a field where cane once grew in disciplined rows. Mist lies close to the earth. Birds begin calling from the trees. Ash darkens patches of soil. Somewhere nearby, people speak of land, work, family, armies, survival, and the meaning of liberty after war. Freedom is not a soft word here. It is scarred, hungry, and hard-won. The history of sugar changes in this moment. It is no longer only the story of how sweetness spread, how wealth accumulated, or how habits formed around tea and coffee. It is also the story of how enslaved people in the richest sugar colony on earth rose against the system and transformed the Atlantic world. The cane fields still whisper in the wind, but now their sound carries something different, not obedience, not only suffering, but the memory of a revolution that made sweetness tremble. You step into Europe in winter, where the roads are hard with frost and the fields sleep under a thin grey sky. Your breath clouds in front of you. Bare branches scratch softly against one another. Somewhere in the distance, a church bell rings through cold air, and the sound travels farther than it should, as if the whole countryside has gone quiet just to listen. The smell is smoke, damp wool, turnips in storage, horse leather, and the faint mineral scent of frozen earth. Sugar is becoming a problem, not because people no longer want it, and that would be too sensible and therefore unlikely. They want it very much. The difficulty is supply. War, blockade, empire, and revolution have disturbed the old Atlantic flow. Cane sugar from colonies can be interrupted by naval conflict, political upheaval, and trade restrictions. Europe, now accustomed to sweetness in drinks, medicine, preserves, and respectable kitchens, begins to ask a dangerous question: can sugar be made at home? The answer grows underground. A mainstream historical fact belongs in these coalfields. During the Napoleonic era, especially after Britain's naval blockade and Napoleon's continental system disrupted trade, France and parts of continental Europe promoted sugar beet cultivation and processing as an alternative to imported cane sugar. The beet had been studied earlier, but wartime pressure turned scientific curiosity into state-supported industry. Sugar, once imagined as a child of tropical heat, begins to emerge from a pale root pulled from European soil. You walk into a laboratory where the windows are filmed with cold. Glass vessels sit on tables. A stove ticks softly as metal expands. The air smells of charcoal, vinegar, damp paper, and sliced beetroot. A scientist bends over a sample, testing, boiling, filtering, measuring. The work is slow and slightly sticky. Beet juice is not charming at first encounter. It is earthy, vegetal, and stubborn. It does not announce itself with tropical glamour. It arrives wearing boots. In the 18th century, European researchers had shown that certain beets contained sugar similar to cane sugar. The Prussian chemist Andreas Sigismund Marggraf identified sugar in beetroot in the 1740s, and his student Franz Karl Achard later developed methods for extraction and factory production. At first, this was interesting but not world-changing. Cane sugar still dominated. Then war tightened the seas, and suddenly the humble beet looked less like a botanical oddity and more like a patriotic vegetable with excellent timing. You stand beside a field of sugar beets. The leaves spread low and broad, dark green against pale soil. A worker pulls one from the ground with a twist and grunt. The root is heavy, white, and rough with clinging dirt. It feels cold in your hands, almost stone-like. When cut, the flesh is firm and wet, with a smell like earth after rain mixed with faint sweetness. Not delicious exactly, more like nature is thinking about dessert, but has not committed. A quirky tidbit hides in Napoleon's enthusiasm. He strongly encouraged beet sugar production in France, supporting schools, factories, and research, partly because relying on colonial cane sugar was inconvenient when British ships controlled so much of the sea. Imagine an emperor, busy rearranging Europe, also caring deeply about root vegetables. History is full of swords, treaties, and uniforms, and then suddenly, a beet walks in and steals the meeting. The factory changes the scene. You hear knives chopping roots, water splashing, pumps moving liquid, and workers calling over machinery. Beet roots are washed, sliced into thin strips, soaked or pressed to draw out sugar-rich juice, then purified and boiled. The smell is unlike cane sugar boiling. It is earthy, warm, and faintly sour, with steam that clings to the walls. Your fingers touch a damp wooden railing, slick with condensation. The floor trembles under equipment that promises efficiency if everyone agrees not to look too comfortable. Beet sugar requires science and organization. It depends on selecting high sugar varieties, growing them in suitable soils, harvesting at the right time, processing quickly, and improving extraction methods. Agricultural experiment stations and factories become part of the story. Farmers must learn a new crop. Engineers must refine machinery. Chemists must clarify juice and crystallize sugar. Governments may offer subsidies, prizes, and protection. Sweetness becomes a national project, which is a very serious fate for something destined to vanish into tea. There is also politics in the beet. Cane sugar ties Europe to colonies, slavery, naval power, and Atlantic trade. Beet sugar offers the dream of continental independence from overseas supply. It does not end exploitation, of course. Rural workers still labour hard, factories are demanding, and agricultural capitalism brings its own inequalities. But beet sugar changes the geography of sweetness. It proves that Europe does not need tropical islands to satisfy its craving, at least not entirely. You move through a village where farmers discuss the new crop with suspicion. Some worry about soil exhaustion, some dislike factory contracts, some welcome cash income. Carts loaded with beets roll toward processing sites, their wheels grinding over rutted roads. Mud freezes on spokes. Horses steam in the cold. Children watch the loads pass, perhaps unimpressed. Because to a child, a beet is still a beet unless someone has turned it into cake, the sugar itself, once refined, is chemically the same sucrose found in cane. This fact is both simple and astonishing. Two very different plants, one tall and tropical, one squat and temperate, can yield the same sweet crystal. On the tongue, refined beet sugar and cane sugar are difficult to distinguish. In the field, however, they belong to different worlds, one of hot cane leaves and plantation mills, the other of cold roots and European factories. Historians still debate how quickly beet sugar would have developed without the extraordinary pressures of war and blockade. Some argue that scientific progress and agricultural experimentation would eventually have made it viable anyway. Others see Napoleon's policies and wartime scarcity as essential accelerants that turned a slow possibility into an urgent industry. The truth may be that the beet needed both patient chemistry and a political crisis large enough to make everyone suddenly interested in root-based sweetness. After Napoleon's fall, cane sugar returns more freely to European markets, and many early beet factories struggle or close. Yet the idea does not disappear. Improvements continue. By the 19th century, beet sugar expands again, especially with better breeding, machinery, and protective tariffs. The beet becomes a serious competitor to cane. Sugar prices gradually fall, more people gain access. Sweetness moves deeper into everyday life. You stand in a refinery where pale crystals dry in trays. The room is warm despite the cold outside. Steam beads on window glass. Workers rake sugar gently, breaking clumps and spreading it evenly. The crystals catch the light like frost, which feels appropriate since this sweetness has been pulled from a winter field. You touch a little to your tongue. It dissolves quickly, cleanly, without revealing whether it came from tropical cane or a beet lifted from mud. Outside, snow begins to fall. It lands on roofs, wagons, fields, and the shoulders of workers heading home. The factory chimney sends a dark line into the white sky. Somewhere in a city, a spoonful of beet sugar sweetens a cup, and the drinker may not know or care that an entire world of chemistry, war, policy, and agricultural experiment has settled there. Sugar has changed again. It has learned to wear the climate of Europe. It has hidden itself in a root, waited through frost, and risen from the soil as proof that desire, once established, will search very hard for another supply. You walk through a sugar colony in the uneasy light of morning, when the sky is pale and the fields are already awake. Dew clings to cane leaves, shining for a brief moment before the heat rises. The air smells of wet grass, wood smoke, damp clothing, and breakfast cooking somewhere beyond the rows. Roosters call. A cartwheel creaks. A child's voice drifts from the quarters, then disappears beneath the scrape of tools being lifted for the day. A word is moving through the world now, abolition. It does not arrive all at once, and it does not arrive cleanly. It comes through petitions, rebellions, sermons, pamphlets, court cases, parliamentary debates, boycotts, wars, and the unending resistance of enslaved people themselves. It is spoken in churches, ports, drawing rooms, plantation yards, and ships. For some, abolition is a moral demand. For others, it's a political threat. For many enslaved people, freedom is not a theory at all. It is the difference between being owned and being able to claim one's own body, family, labour, and future. A mainstream historical fact belongs here. Britain abolished the slave trade in 1807 and slavery in most of its empire in 1833, while other European empires and American societies ended slavery at different times across the 19th century. In many sugar-producing regions, emancipation did not end plantation labour or racial inequality. It changed the legal form of exploitation, while sugar estates searched urgently for new ways to keep workers in the fields. You stand near a plantation bell. Its iron surface is cool under your fingertips. For years, bells have ordered the working day. calling people to labour, meals, punishment, and emergency. After emancipation, the bell may still ring, but its meaning is unstable. Planters want discipline to continue. Freed people want land, wages, family stability, worship, education, movement, and control over time. The sound hangs in the humid air, no longer as absolute as it once pretended to be. The moment after legal freedom is not a gentle sunrise in a painting. It is negotiation, conflict, hope, disappointment, and strategy. Formerly enslaved people often seek to leave estates, reunite families, establish independent villages, farm provision grounds, attend churches, start schools, and bargain for wages. Plantation owners panic about labour supply because a system built on coercion has not done much to make the job attractive. This is not shocking. If your workplace requires chains to keep employees, the Human Resources Department has failed somewhat spectacularly. In the British Caribbean, emancipation includes an apprenticeship system for a few years, supposedly a transition from slavery to freedom. In practice, many freed people see it as slavery under a fresh coat of legal paint. They protest, resist, and demand full freedom. Apprenticeship ends earlier than originally planned, in 1838. The celebration is real, yet so is the struggle that follows. Freedom brings legal personhood, but land remains concentrated. Wages are contested, and colonial courts often favour planters. You walk into a newly founded free village. The road is rough, bordered by small houses, gardens, and church buildings. Smoke rises from cooking fires. The smell is cassava, peppers, damp wood, and laundry drying in sun. A woman tends a garden plot with careful attention. A man repairs a roof. Children carry books or slates. The atmosphere feels fragile and determined. Every fence post, every planted row, every chapel bench says time belongs to us now, at least more than it did. Sugar estates, however, still need labour. As formerly enslaved people leave or bargain harder, planters and colonial governments turn to indentured labour. Workers are recruited, pressured, deceived, or contracted from India, China, Madeira, Africa, Java, and other places, depending on the colony. They travel across oceans to plantations in British Guiana, Trinidad, Jamaica, Mauritius, Fiji, Reunion, Cuba, Peru, and elsewhere. Contracts promise wages, housing, and return passages, but reality often includes harsh discipline, poor conditions, debt, illness, and limited freedom. You stand on a dock as indentured workers disembark. The air smells of salt, coal smoke, wet rope, and nervous bodies. Bundles are carried close. Children stare at the unfamiliar shore. Officials check papers. Employers count arrivals. The workers bring languages, religions, seeds, recipes, songs, and memories. They are not blank labour units, though plantation systems try hard to see them that way. They will reshape the societies they enter, creating new communities under difficult conditions. A quirky tidbit appears in the foodways born from these migrations. In many sugar colonies, Indian indentured workers carried ingredients and cooking traditions that later blended with African, indigenous, European, and Chinese influences, dishes using roti, curry, chutney, pepper sauces, plantains, rice, and local greens became part of new Creole cuisines. Sugar history, being unable to remain politely inside the sugar bowl, wanders directly into lunch. Indenture is not slavery, but it can be severely coercive. Contracts bind workers for years. Leaving an estate without permission may bring punishment. Wages can be withheld. Housing may be crowded. Medical care may be poor. Women workers face particular vulnerabilities, while also forming families, running households, labouring in fields, and defending their choices under intense scrutiny. Some workers complete contracts and return home. Others stay, buy land. build temples, mosques, churches, shops, and farms, and become ancestors of modern diasporic communities. Historians still argue over how to compare post-emancipation indenture with slavery. Some emphasize the differences contracts, wages, legal identity, and limited terms. Others stress the continuities restricted movement, racial hierarchy, plantation discipline, and exploitation. The debate is important because sugar's labour system did not simply become fair when slavery ended. It adapted, it changed costume, it learned new words. You move through a cane field worked by wage labourers and indentured workers. The sun beats down, leaves scrape cloth. The ground is uneven and damp. A supervisor watches from the path. Workers talk in low voices when they can, sharing news, jokes, complaints, and small strategies for making the day bearable. The sound of cutting remains the same blade through stalk falling, bundle dragged aside. Freedom has changed the law, but the cane still demands bodies. In cities and ports, abolition reshapes politics and memory. Former slave traders reinvent themselves as respectable merchants. Planters seek compensation for lost property, meaning they are paid for losing legal ownership of people, while the formerly enslaved receive no comparable payment for generations of stolen labour. That detail sits in history like a stone in the shoe. It is small enough for some to ignore, but impossible to walk honestly without feeling it. Abolitionist sugar boycotts also leave a trace. Some consumers refuse sugar produced by enslaved labour, choosing alternatives when available. Pamphlets encourage households to see the sugar bowl as a moral object. Women, often excluded from formal politics, participate through purchasing choices and petitions. The domestic table becomes political. A spoonful of sweetness asks a question: what did it cost, and who paid? Evening settles over the colony. The cane fields darken. Frogs begin singing in ditches filled with warm water. In a free village, a hymn rises from a chapel, soft and steady. On an estate, workers return tired, carrying tools across their shoulders. At the dock, a ship prepares to leave with sugar packed for distant markets. The world has changed, but not enough. Freedom has opened doors, and sugar has found ways to build new corridors of control. You breathe in the night air, sweet with flowers and smoke. Around you are people making life after bondage, people arriving under contract, people bargaining for wages, people planting gardens, people remembering names that slavery tried to erase. Sugar remains powerful, but its labour force is no longer silent in the same way. Across fields, villages, docks, and kitchens, the old plantation order is challenged, revised, resisted, and carried forward in altered form, leaving a bittersweet aftertaste that no refinery can whiten away. You enter a 19th century refinery where the morning light is pale, but the rooms are already hot. Steam clouds the windows. Wooden floors tremble under machinery. Somewhere above you, belts turn over pulleys with a steady slap, 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 like a giant creature breathing through leather. The air smells of coal smoke, lime, wet sugar, iron, sweat, and syrup warmed until it becomes almost too rich to enjoy. Sugar is becoming industrial, no longer only a crop of fields and plantation mills. It now passes into factories, railways, ports, warehouses, and chemical processes. It moves faster, in larger quantities, through systems that depend on engines, accountants, dock workers, engineers, and urban consumers who expect sweetness to be cleaner, cheaper, and always available. The sweet force is not fading. It is learning to wear a factory coat. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this loud room. During the 19th century, sugar refining became increasingly industrialized, using improved machinery, steam power, filtration, vacuum pans, centrifuges, and large-scale urban refineries to produce whiter and more consistent sugar. Cane and beet sugar both entered this industrial world, and the result was a dramatic expansion of supply for ordinary households. Sugar was stepping down from the aristocratic table and walking into the grocer's shop. You stand near a vacuum pan, where syrup boils at lower temperatures under reduced pressure. The process protects flavour, saves fuel, and gives refiners more control. It sounds elegant when described calmly, but standing beside the equipment is less polite. Pipes hiss. Valves knock. Heat dampens your collar. A worker checks gauges with a careful eye, because pressure, steam, and sugar syrup are not the sort of friends you trust blindly. The refinery's work is transformation. Raw sugar arrives brown, sticky, and uneven. It may still carry molasses, plant fragments, minerals, and the smell of distant fields. The refinery clarifies, filters, boils, crystallizes, spins, dries, grades, and packs. Slowly, through labour and chemistry, the sugar becomes pale, sparkling, and socially presentable. Refining creates the illusion of purity, and humans, being humans, adore purity when someone else has done the scrubbing. You watch centrifuges spin crystals away from molasses. The sound is a rising metallic hum. The machine shakes slightly as it works. When the spinning slows, sugar clings to the sides in damp, bright masses. A worker scrapes it free, and crystals fall with a soft hiss. Touching them, you feel grit and moisture. They shine like frost, but the room around them is all heat and soot. Outside, the city carries sugar onward. Carts rattle over cobblestones. Later, railway wagons take over, linking refineries to inland towns. Sacks move into shops. Grocers weigh sugar for customers in brown paper. Families buy smaller amounts more often. Bakers use more of it. Jam makers need it. Confectioners dream in it. Tea tables depend on it. Sugar becomes part of the weekly rhythm of shopping and cooking. A quirky tidbit sits on the counter of the grocer's shop. Before granulated sugar became common, many households bought sugar in loaves and broke it at home with nippers. By the later 19th century, packaged and granulated sugar made sweetness far easier to use. The drama of cracking a sugar loaf slowly gave way to the humble scoop. Civilization, apparently, includes fewer opportunities to attack dessert with tools. Industrial sugar changes preservation. With cheaper sugar, fruit can be turned into jam on a larger scale. Marmalade, preserves, candied peel, bottled syrups, and sweetened condensed products spread through markets. You walk into a kitchen where berries bubble in a pot. The scent is red, bright, and sticky, filling the room with summer even as rain taps outside. Sugar thickens fruit, protects it from spoilage, and lets seasonal abundance survive into colder months. Factories also change labour. Refinery workers face long hours, heat, dust, burns, machinery hazards, and uncertain wages. Their work is skilled but often hard. In beet-growing regions, farmers and seasonal labourers plant, weed, lift, and cart heavy roots to factories. Women and children often work in fields and processing tasks, especially where family labour is drawn into the crop. Sugar grows cheaper, but cheapness still has hands behind it. You walk through a beet factory yard at dusk. Wagons arrive caked with mud. Piles of roots steam faintly in cold air. Workers fork them into channels for washing. The smell is earthy, sour-sweet, and damp, very different from cane. Yet inside, the final crystals may look nearly identical. Industrial sugar quietly erases the identity of its plant. Cane and beet meet in the same bowl, like two strangers wearing the same white suit. Historians still argue about how much industrial sugar changed working-class diets for the better or worse. Some point out that sugar supplied cheap energy and made tea, porridge, bread, and preserved fruit more appealing during hard lives. Others stress that rising sugar consumption encouraged poor nutrition, tooth decay, and dependence on sweetened calories. Both views can be true at once. History enjoys refusing simple answers, which is inconsiderate but usually accurate. Advertising helps sugar appear wholesome and modern. Posters show shining crystals, happy children, neat kitchens, and smiling mothers stirring bowls. White sugar suggests cleanliness, progress, and domestic care. It is marketed not as a luxury with a dark past, but as a friendly ingredient for cakes, tea, jam, biscuits, puddings, and treats. The refinery disappears behind the recipe. The field disappears behind the packet. The worker disappears behind the sparkle. By night, the refinery windows glow orange. Smoke rises into a sky already thick with city soot. Inside, machinery slows, but the smell of warm sugar lingers in the walls. Outside, a family sits down to tea. A spoon dips into a bowl of granulated sugar. Crystals fall, dissolve, and vanish into the cup. You feel the change clearly now. Sugar has become ordinary, and ordinary things are powerful because they stop asking permission. It enters cupboards, lunch pails, factory canteens, school treats, bakery shelves, and kitchen tables. Once rare enough to impress kings, it now sweetens the tired worker's tea. The world has not become gentler, exactly, but it has become sweeter in a new industrial way, measured, packaged, transported, affordable, and quietly everywhere. You step into a Victorian street just as evening lamps begin to glow behind glass. The pavement is damp from a recent rain, and the wheels of passing carts leave dark, shining tracks along the road. Shop windows brighten one by one, turning the street into a ribbon of warm squares. The air smells of coal smoke, wet wool, horses, roasted chestnuts, and sugar drifting from a confectioner's doorway like a small, shameless invitation. Inside the sweet shop, everything seems designed to make restraint feel unreasonable. Glass jars line the shelves, filled with striped sticks, sugared almonds, barley sugar, acid drops, peppermints, fruit pastilles, boiled sweets, and bright little things that look as if jewels have become edible and slightly sticky. The counter is polished by sleeves and elbows. The floorboards creak under your feet. A bell trembles above the door each time someone enters from the cold. Sugar has entered childhood. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this glittering shop. In the 19th century, cheaper sugar and industrial production helped expand commercial confectionery, making sweets, jams, biscuits, cakes, and chocolates more available to broad parts of society. Companies developed branded products, packaging, and advertising that linked sugar with pleasure, family life, childhood, celebration, and modern comfort. Sweetness now had a public face, printed in bright colours. You watch a child press a nose near the glass, breath fogging the pane. A penny may buy a small treat, and the decision is enormous. Peppermint or toffee, lemon drop or licorice. This is serious business, not to be mocked by adults who have merely forgotten how large a penny can feel in the hand. The shopkeeper reaches into a jar with metal tongs. Sweets fall into a twist of paper with a dry little rattle. The child receives the packet as if handed a private kingdom. The candy itself is a product of chemistry, machinery, and imagination. Sugar can be boiled at different stages: thread, soft ball, hard crack, caramel. It can be pulled, aerated, coloured, flavoured, moulded, spun, crystallized, and coated with glucose syrups, acids, fruit essences, mint oils, nuts, chocolate, and starch moulds. Confectioners create textures that dissolve, crunch, stretch, fizz, or cling. You feel a warm piece of toffee between your fingers, softening slightly from body heat, smelling of butter, caramel, and childhood trouble. A quirky tidbit hides in the jars. Some Victorian sweets were advertised as medicinal or strengthening, blurring the line between candy and cure. Peppermint soothed the stomach, licorice comforted the throat. Barley sugar seemed wholesome, and cough lozenges could be almost indistinguishable from treats. Apparently, so if something tasted nice, people were very willing to believe it had medical opinions. Sugar's new connection to childhood is not accidental. As ideas of childhood change in Europe and North America, children are increasingly imagined as innocent, sentimental, and in need of special pleasures, at least in middle-class culture. Sweets become rewards, birthday treats, Christmas gifts, fairground delights, and schoolroom bribes. A child who behaves might receive a sugar plum or a piece of candy. A child who misbehaves might still receive one from a grandparent, because grandparents have always been dangerous loopholes. You enter a family kitchen where cake batter waits in a bowl. The room is warm from the oven. Flour dust clings to the table. Butter, sugar, and eggs have been beaten into pale cream, and the smell is rich, soft, and promising. Baking becomes easier with cheaper refined sugar, improved ovens, baking powders, printed cookbooks, and standardized measures. Cakes move from rare feast foods toward more common celebrations. Sugar helps invent the taste of domestic happiness. Empire sits quietly in the cupboard. Cocoa from West Africa and the Caribbean. Tea from Asia. Spices from imperial roots. Sugar from cane fields or beet factories. Dried fruits from Mediterranean and colonial trade. All gather in a single cake. The kitchen looks private, but it is global. A spoon scrapes the bowl, and the sound is homely. Yet the ingredients carry ships, plantations, railways, warehouses, advertisements, taxes, and labourers whose names never appear on the recipe card. Chocolate becomes especially important. Once mainly a drink for elites, it gradually transforms into solid confections through innovations in processing. Pressing cocoa butter, mixing sugar and cocoa, and later creating smoother textures. Firms in Britain, Switzerland, France, the Netherlands, and elsewhere build reputations around chocolate and sweet snacks. Packaging makes the product trustworthy. Branding gives it personality. A wrapped bar can travel farther, last longer, and look more respectable than something scooped from a jar by a man with suspiciously syrupy fingers. You walk through a colonial exhibition hall, where goods from across empire are displayed under banners and glass. Sugar, cocoa, spices, fruits, and manufactured sweets appear as symbols of progress and abundance. Visitors stroll past displays, admiring the world arranged for consumption. The hall smells of varnished wood, perfume, machinery oil, damp coats, and samples handed out by smiling attendants. Empire presents itself as a shopping list with flags attached. Advertising grows more sophisticated. Posters show rosy-cheeked children, elegant mothers, strong workers, charming animals, and smiling families enjoying sweetened products. Sugar is sold as energy, purity, care, and fun. The unpleasant histories behind raw materials are pushed into the margins. Bright paper has a marvellous ability to distract the eye. A cheerful tin of biscuits does not mention exhausted field hands, underpaid factory workers, or the political economy of the empire. Very inconsiderate of it, really. Children in working-class neighbourhoods also encounter sweets, though in different ways. Cheap candies become accessible pleasures in lives often shaped by crowded housing, long labour, and limited diets. A penny sweet can matter greatly. It offers colour, flavour, and personal choice in a world with few luxuries. At the same time, cheap adulterated sweets sometimes raise health concerns. Some 19th century candies contain unsafe colourings or additives before food regulation strengthens. The candy jar can be magical and a little alarming, which, to be fair, is a common Victorian combination. Historians still debate how deeply sugar shaped modern ideas of childhood pleasure. Some argue that sweets helped create a commercial culture aimed specifically at children, teaching them to desire branded treats early. Others point out that adults bought, controlled, and interpreted most of these products, making candy part of family discipline, affection, and social display. The child wants the sweet, the parent pays for it, the advertiser flatters both, and the dentist waits patiently in the shadows. You hear a fairground in the distance. Music wheezes from a hand organ. People laugh beneath strings of lamps. Sugar appears as spun candy, toffee apples, gingerbread, sugared nuts, and sticky paper packets carried in warm hands. The ground smells of trampled grass, mud, animals, frying batter and caramel. A child licks sugar from fingertips. An adult pretends not to want any, then asks for just a bite, which is one of the oldest lies in dessert history. Sugar also enters holidays with new force. Christmas sweets, Easter treats, wedding cakes, birthday cakes, and Valentine confections become more elaborate and commercialized. The calendar fills with excuses, which is exactly what the sugar trade prefers. A celebration without sweetness starts to feel incomplete. Love becomes chocolate. Childhood becomes candy. Hospitality becomes cake. Memory becomes the taste of something given in a bright wrapper, late at night. The confectioner closes the shop. The jars stand silent, colours dimmed behind glass. A faint dusting of sugar remains on the counter. Outside, fog thickens around the street lamps, turning each one into a yellow halo. Somewhere upstairs, a child hides one last sweet beneath a pillow, planning to eat it later and probably forgetting until it becomes lint-flavoured treasure. You hold a small striped candy in your palm. It is hard, glossy, and cheerful. It contains factory work, colonial trade, chemistry, advertising, family ritual, and the growing idea that sweetness belongs to innocence. Sugar has learned to smile now. It wears bright wrappers, sits in shop windows, and whispers to children through glass. Its power is no longer only in wealth or labour. It has entered imagination, memory, reward, and the tender machinery of wanting. You enter an ordinary kitchen at the edge of the 20th century, where the table is scrubbed pale from years of use, and the morning light falls in a quiet square across the floor. A kettle begins to tremble on the stove. Bread waits under a cloth. A jar of jam catches the light in red, glassy depths. The air smells of toast, coal smoke, damp cotton, and sugar hiding inside nearly everything. This is one of sugar's quieter transformations. It no longer needs to announce itself as candy, cake, or celebration. It begins to slip into daily food. It sweetens bread, sauces, pickles, canned vegetables, condensed milk, breakfast foods, medicines, tonics, and bottled drinks. It becomes less visible as it becomes more common. The sweetest trick sugar ever learned was not sparkle. It was disguise. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this cupboard. By the late 19th and early 20th centuries, industrial food production and global sugar supply helped increase the use of sugar in processed foods, preserves, baked goods, and beverages, as canning, bottling, mass baking, and branded groceries expanded. Sugar became a useful ingredient for flavour, texture, colour, preservation, and consumer appeal. It was not merely added because people liked sweetness, though they absolutely did. It also helped food behave. You sit at the breakfast table and spread jam on bread. The knife drags through a thick surface, then glides. The jam smells of summer fruit, cooked down and held in place by sugar. Without sugar, ripe berries are brief, delicate, and deeply dramatic about spoiling. With enough sugar and proper heating, fruit can survive months in a jar. A spoonful in winter tastes like a small rebellion against cold weather. Jam making becomes both household practice and factory business. In home kitchens, women and servants boil fruit in heavy pans, skimming foam, testing set, sealing jars. In factories, larger quantities of fruit, sugar, and pectin move through industrial kettles and filling lines. The sounds are different, but the purpose is similar: capture abundance, sell comfort, and make breakfast slightly less bleak. The smell of boiling fruit is lush, hot, and sticky, filling walls and clothing with sweetness. Sugar also enters bread. Not all bread is sweet, of course, and many traditional loaves remain plain. But in some industrial baking, sugar feeds yeast, improves browning, softens crumb, and pleases the tongue. A loaf can become lighter, softer, more predictable. You press a slice between your fingers and feel it spring. It smells mild and warm, less like a rustic field and more like a product that has been carefully taught not to offend anyone. A quirky tidbit sits on the shelf among patent medicines. Many syrups, tonics, and elixirs sold in the 19th and early 20th centuries use sugar to mask bitterness and make medicine appealing. Some contained alcohol, opiates, caffeine, or other potent ingredients. So a spoonful of sugar did not only help medicine go down. Occasionally, the medicine itself was having a rather suspicious party. Labels promised strength, calm nerves, bright eyes, easy sleep, and several miracles that sound best when read by candlelight and not by a pharmacist. You open a pantry and find canned peaches as sweet pickles, chutney, tomato sauce, condensed milk, biscuits, cocoa mix, breakfast cereal, and bottled cordial. Some taste openly sweet, others carry only a small sweetness, enough to round sharpness, soften acidity, or keep customers reaching back for more. Sugar is useful because it can hide behind salt, vinegar, spice, fat, and fruit. It does not always shout. Sometimes it simply smooths the corners. Canning changes the rhythm of food. Fruit and vegetables no longer depend entirely on season or local harvest. Sugar syrups preserve peaches, pears, cherries, and pineapple in tins. Condensed milk, sweetened heavily, becomes stable enough to travel and store. It feeds households, soldiers, travellers, and bakers. You open a tin and smell warm milk, caramel and metal. The texture is thick and glossy, folding slowly from the spoon like pale cream with secrets. Breakfast becomes one of sugar's great territories. Porridge may receive brown sugar or treacle. Toast takes jam or marmalade. Tea is sweetened. Later, packaged cereals arrive, some lightly sweetened, some proudly so. The morning, once a plain negotiation with hunger, becomes a place for branded promise, energy, cheerfulness, modernity. A better day, apparently, can be poured from a box, provided one has enough milk and does not read the sugar content too closely. You walk through a grocery store where labels face outward like tiny advertisements standing at attention. Paper packets, tins, jars, bottles, and boxes make food look orderly and trustworthy. The shop smells of flour, soap, dried beans, coffee, cheese, oranges, and wooden drawers. Sugar appears in many forms: granulated, powdered, brown, syrup, treacle, molasses, glucose, invert sugar. Some are visible. Some are buried in ingredients lists that only the truly suspicious bother to read. Sauces reveal sugar's talent for balance. Tomato ketchup, brown sauce, barbecue-style mixtures, relishes, and chutneys combine sweetness with acidity and spice. The sugar thickens, preserves, and softens. It makes sourness friendly. It makes saltiness rounder. It helps create the flavor profile that modern eaters often recognize as comforting, even when they cannot name why. A spoon touches a sauce bottle, and history slides out slowly, glossy and red. Historians still argue about when consumers began to notice sugar as a hidden ingredient rather than an obvious treat. Some suggest that early processed foods trained people gradually to expect sweetness in everyday meals. Others argue that the category of hidden sugar is mostly a modern concern, shaped by nutrition science, labeling laws, and health debates. The uncertainty is useful. It reminds you that taste can change before people have words to describe the change. Sugar also affects texture. It keeps cakes moist, helps biscuits crisp, gives ice cream body, makes candies stable, encourages browning through caramelization, and works with proteins and starches in complex ways. It is not just flavor, it is architecture. Remove it carelessly, and a recipe may collapse, harden, weep, or sulk. Food science spends a great deal of time explaining why grandmother's cake was not emotionally prepared for substitutions. In working households, sweetened foods offer quick energy and affordable pleasure. Bread with jam, tea with sugar, a biscuit during a work break, a spoon of syrup over pudding all can brighten a long day. But the same accessibility also increases dependence on cheap sweetness. Sugar moves from luxury to expectation, then from expectation to background noise. It becomes part of what food is supposed to taste like. You stand at the sink as evening gathers. The kitchen is quiet except for the faint clink of dishes in warm water. Your fingers feel wrinkled from soap and steam. On the table are crumbs, a jam-smeared knife, a medicine bottle, and a cup with sugar settled at the bottom because someone stirred lazily, which is understandable but historically disappointing. The room looks ordinary. That is the point. Sugar has entered the ordinary so thoroughly that it no longer glitters. It waits in jars, tins, loaves, sauces, syrups, powders, and childhood remedies. It is sweetness made domestic, industrial, invisible, and dependable. You taste it not as a rare delight, but as the flavour of the everyday, the soft background note of modern life, humming quietly in the pantry while the kettle cools. You step into a city under wartime blackout, where windows are covered, street lamps are dimmed, and the night feels thicker than usual. Footsteps sound carefully on the pavement. Somewhere far off, an engine hums, then fades. The air smells of coal smoke, damp brick, wool coats, and the faint metallic anxiety of a world holding its breath. In a kitchen behind dark curtains, someone opens a small paper ration book and counts sweetness by the ounce. Sugar, once a luxury and then a daily comfort, becomes scarce again. War has a way of making ordinary things suddenly visible. Bread, butter, tea, meat, fuel, soap, and sugar all step out from the background and become matters of planning. You notice how carefully the sugar tin is opened, how gently the spoon is dipped, how no crystal is wasted. The sound of sugar falling into a cup is smaller now, more deliberate. It is not abundance, it is permission. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this dim kitchen. During the First and Second World Wars, many countries rationed sugar because shipping disruptions, military needs, trade blockades, and pressure on agricultural production limited supplies. In Britain, sugar rationing began during both wars and continued after the Second World War until 1953. In the United States, sugar was rationed during the Second World War as well. Sweetness became a controlled substance of everyday life, stamped, measured, and queued for. You stand beside a woman making a cake without enough sugar, without enough eggs, and with the calm determination of someone who refuses to let geopolitics ruin pudding. She uses grated carrot, dried fruit, syrup, saccharin tablets, or whatever substitute the cupboard permits. The kitchen smells of flour, spice, warm milk, and mild disappointment trying very hard to become optimism. A spoon scrapes the bowl. The batter is thinner than she would like. Still, into the oven it goes. Rationing changes taste. People learn to stretch sweetness with fruit, root vegetables, jam, honey if available, and artificial sweeteners. Children grow up thinking a small piece of candy is an event. Adults save sugar for birthdays, invalids, tea, or preserving fruit. A jar of jam becomes almost strategic. Housewives, home economists, and government pamphlets offer recipes that promise satisfaction with less. Some are clever, some are brave. Some should perhaps have remained confidential. You walk through a queue outside a shop. The morning is cold, and breath clouds above scarves. People hold baskets, ration books, and private hopes, the shop smells of paper, wooden shelves, tea, onions, and the faint sweetness of goods stored behind the counter. Conversation moves softly, news from relatives, rumours of shipments, complaints about shortages, jokes polished by exhaustion. Humour survives in queues because what else is it going to do? Enlist. Sugar also matters to armies. It provides quick energy, preserves food, and appears in chocolate, condensed milk, jam, hard candies, sweetened drinks, and ration packs. Soldiers carry sweetness in pockets and tins, sometimes as comfort as much as fuel. You imagine a soldier opening a small bar of chocolate in mud, cold, and fear. The smell is faint but familiar. For a moment, the taste carries home childhood, a kitchen, a hand offering something kind. But war also pushes science forward. Laboratories study nutrition, calories, vitamins, preservation, and substitutes. Governments become more interested in what populations eat because healthy civilians and soldiers are part of national strength. Sugar is no longer only a household ingredient, it is counted in calories, supply chains, public health, morale, and industrial planning. The sugar bowl has been drafted into bureaucracy, which seems unfair but historically predictable. A quirky tidbit belongs to the era of substitutes. Saccharin, discovered in the 19th century, becomes more widely used during times of sugar shortage, though many people find its taste slightly bitter or metallic. Imagine trying to cheerfully sweeten tea with a tablet that tastes as if a coin has been having philosophical problems. Still, scarcity makes people forgiving. A not-quite-sweet cup can be better than no sweetness at all. You enter a food laboratory where white coats move under bright lamps. The room smells of alcohol burners, glassware, paper labels, and cooked samples. Scientists test sweeteners, preservation methods, and nutritional values. They measure what earlier generations judged by tongue, eye, and habit. Calories become numbers. Deficiency becomes a public concern. Food becomes a science of survival. Nutrition debates sharpen around sugar. Some experts treat it as useful energy, especially for workers, children, and soldiers. Others worry that it displaces more nourishing foods or contributes to dental problems and poor diets. The argument does not settle neatly. Sugar is energy, pleasure, preservative, habit, and temptation. It can comfort a tired person and crowd out better food. It can save fruit in a jar and rot teeth in a mouth. The same crystal carries several truths, because apparently even pantry items enjoy complexity. Historians still argue about how rationing changed long-term eating habits. Some believe wartime scarcity taught thrift, cooking skills, and appreciation for simple foods. Others argue that once rationing ended, pent-up desire encouraged a rush toward abundance, sweets, packaged treats, and convenience foods. Both patterns appear in different households and countries. Memory is not uniform. One person remembers wartime pudding with affection. Another remembers it as grey sadness with raisins. You move into the post-war years, where ration books linger in drawers and people dream of full shelves. Factories shift from military supply to civilian production. Candy companies reintroduce favourites. Bakeries expand offerings. Children press coins into counters and choose sweets with the seriousness of diplomats. The end of rationing feels like more than a policy change. It feels like permission to enjoy again. Yet science does not leave the table. Artificial sweeteners continue to develop. Cyclamates, aspartame, sucralose, and other low-calorie sweeteners will later enter debates about dieting, diabetes, food industry innovation, and safety testing. The desire for sweetness without sugar becomes a modern quest, almost alchemical in spirit. Humanity looks at sugar and says, "We adore you, but could you possibly stop having consequences?" Sugar, naturally, does not answer. By evening, the blackout curtains are pulled back in memory, and a brighter kitchen appears. The sugar tin is fuller now. A cake rises properly, Jam shines on toast. A child licks icing from a spoon. But the experience of scarcity has left a trace. People who measured sugar carefully may keep saving, storing, and scraping bowls clean long after shops recover. Sweetness remembers absence. You hold a ration book in one hand and a sugar spoon in the other. Paper, ink, crystal, and appetite meet quietly in the palm. Wars have shown that sugar is not just pleasure, it is logistics, morale, chemistry, health, memory, and state power. When it disappears, people notice how deeply it had entered daily life. When it returns, it tastes not only sweet, but relieved. You step into the late 20th century beneath the fluorescent lights of a supermarket, where the air is cool, dry, and faintly scented with cardboard, fruit wax, floor cleaner, roasted coffee, and bread sealed in plastic. A cart rattles under your hands. Music drifts from hidden speakers, cheerful enough to be suspicious. Shelves stretch in bright rows, stacked with bottles, boxes, packets, jars, tubs, and cans. Sugar is everywhere, though it no longer always uses its own name. It waits in cereal, soda, flavoured yogurt, ketchup, salad dressing, canned soup, frozen meals, granola bars, energy drinks, sauces, baby snacks, pastries, and bread. It wears disguises like corn syrup, dextrose, fructose, glucose, malt syrup, evaporated cane juice, fruit concentrate, and several other aliases that sound like they were invented by a committee trying not to make eye contact. The modern sugar machine is not only a field, refinery, or candy shop. It is a global system of agriculture, chemistry, marketing, retail, habit, and health debate. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this aisle. In the 20th century, especially after mid-century, the food industry greatly expanded the use of refined sugars and sweeteners in processed foods and beverages. In the United States, high fructose corn syrup became widely used from the 1970s onward, partly because of corn production, industrial processing, and pricing conditions. Sugar was no longer just spooned into food by the person eating it. It was built into products before they ever reached the kitchen. You pick up a bottle of soda. It is cold from the refrigerator case, beaded with moisture that dampens your fingers. When opened, it sighs sharply, releasing a smell of citrus, caramel, fruit flavouring, or something that claims to be berry despite never having met one socially. The first sip is bright, fizzy, sweet, and slightly acidic. It wakes the mouth. It asks for another sip before the first has fully vanished. This is sweetness engineered for return. Beverage companies become powerful symbols of modern sugar consumption. Their logos appear on vending machines, sports events, roadside signs, school fundraisers, movie theatres, and family tables. Sweetened drinks are portable, affordable, and heavily advertised. They promise refreshment, happiness, youth, friendship, energy, and sometimes athletic greatness, which is ambitious for a liquid mostly trying to be cold and bubbly. You walk through a bottling plant where metal lines carry containers in quick, clattering procession. Syrup mixes with carbonated water, caps snap on, labels blur past, cases stack onto pallets. The smell is sweet, sharp, and industrial, with notes of plastic wrap, machine oil, and citrus concentrate. The speed is mesmerizing. Sugar has become liquid logistics, flowing through pipes, trucks, vending machines, and convenience stores. Corn syrup enters the story as a different kind of sweetness. Cornfields spread under wide skies, their leaves rustling in hot wind. Harvesters move through rows with mechanical confidence. In processing plants, starch is broken down into glucose and converted into sweeter mixtures. High fructose corn syrup becomes attractive to manufacturers because it is liquid, easy to blend, stable in beverages, and often economically favourable in certain markets. It does not replace all sugar everywhere, but it becomes a major player in processed food. A quirky tidbit hides in the language of labels. Many people imagine corn syrup and high fructose corn syrup as the same thing, but they are not identical. Ordinary corn syrup is mostly glucose, while high fructose corn syrup has some glucose converted into fructose to make it sweeter. The food label, in other words, is not a bedtime poem. It is a small chemistry exam printed in tiny letters. Public health debates grow louder as sugar consumption rises in many places. Dentists warn about tooth decay. Doctors and researchers study links between sugary drinks, weight gain, type 2 diabetes, fatty liver disease, and heart health. Nutrition advice shifts over time, sometimes focusing on fat, sometimes calories, sometimes added sugars, sometimes ultra-processed foods. Consumers are left standing in the aisle, holding a snack bar and wondering why breakfast now requires a policy briefing. Historians and nutrition scholars still argue over how much blame sugar should carry for modern health problems. Some emphasize added sugars, especially in drinks, because liquid calories can be easy to consume quickly. Others point to broader patterns: sedentary work, portion sizes, food marketing, poverty, stress, sleep, urban design, and the rise of ultra-processed diets. Sugar is central, but it is not the only actor. The modern food system is a crowded stage, and everyone is pretending not to know who left crumbs everywhere. Governments respond in different ways. Some countries introduce sugar taxes on sweetened beverages. Some require clearer labelling. Schools limit sugary drinks. Health campaigns advise people to reduce added sugar. Industry reformulates products, sometimes lowering sugar, sometimes replacing it with non-sugar sweeteners, sometimes making packages smaller while acting as if this is a gift from the heavens. Consumers learn new phrases: low-calorie, diet, zero sugar, no added sugar, naturally sweetened. You open a refrigerator in a modern home. Light spills across cartons, jars, leftovers, fruit, sauces, and drinks. A bottle of low-sugar juice sits beside a full-sugar soda. Yogurt cups promise health, but taste like dessert in athletic clothing. A chocolate sauce waits on the door shelf with quiet confidence. The cold air smells of milk, onions, plastic, and strawberries. Modern sweetness lives among contradictions, pleasure and warning, comfort and calculation, treat and habit. Globalization spreads sweet products widely, but not evenly. In many countries, rising incomes, urbanization, supermarket chains, fast food, and advertising increase access to processed sweets and drinks. Local cuisines adapt. Traditional desserts meet packaged snacks. Street vendors sell both handmade sweets and branded beverages. Sugar becomes part of global modernity. Yet it also takes local forms, shaped by climate, religion, festivals, class, and taste. At the same time, sugar production remains agricultural and political. Cane fields still stretch across Brazil, India, Thailand, Australia, and many other regions. Beet fields continue in Europe, Russia, North America, and elsewhere. Workers still cut cane in some places by hand, while machines harvest in others. Environmental concerns include water use, soil exhaustion, burning fields, fertilizer runoff, and habitat change. The clean white crystal still begins in land, weather, policy, and labour. You stand at the end of the supermarket aisle, a child asks for candy, a tired adult reads a label, a worker restocks soda, a diabetic shopper checks carbohydrates, a runner grabs an energy gel. A parent chooses apples, then cookies too, because life is long and nobody should be judged too quickly near the checkout. The modern sugar machine does not force sweetness only through luxury or scarcity. It works through availability, through convenience, through memory, through flavour designed to be familiar before you know why. Sugar has become cheap enough to vanish into the background and powerful enough to return as a public concern. It no longer merely shapes empires across oceans. It shapes bodies, habits, labels, policies, and the quiet negotiations people make with themselves under bright supermarket lights. Section 20. You stand in a kitchen at night, long after the shops have closed and the streets have softened into quiet. A small lamp glows over the counter. Outside, rain slides down the window in thin silver lines. Inside, the air smells of warm milk, toasted bread, clean dishes, and the faint sweetness of something kept in a jar. Your hand reaches for a spoon, and the sugar crystals shift with a dry whisper, light as sand. This is the strange ending place of sugar's long journey, not an empire, not a battlefield, not a refinery, not a plantation ledger, but an ordinary kitchen where sweetness waits beside tea, coffee, fruit, cereal, medicine, memory, and comfort. Sugar has become so familiar that it's easy to forget how far it travelled, how many landscapes it altered, how many lives it touched, and how much longing it gathered into itself. A mainstream historical fact belongs in this quiet room. Today, sugar is produced from both sugarcane and sugar beet, and it remains one of the world's major agricultural commodities, used in food, drinks, medicine, fermentation, fuel industries, and countless processed products. Its story reaches across tropical fields, temperate farms, ports, factories, laboratories, shops, and homes. The little crystal on your spoon is not simple. It only pretends to be. You stir sugar into a cup and watch it disappear. That vanishing is almost too perfect a metaphor, which is rude, because metaphors should not be this convenient. Sugar dissolves, but its effect remains. It changes the taste without leaving a visible trace. So did its history. It dissolved into languages, cuisines, economies, migrations, racial hierarchies, family rituals, scientific debates, labour struggles, and personal habits. You can taste sugar's legacy in foodways around the world. In the Caribbean, cane history lives inside rum, cakes, syrups, preserves, sweetbreads, festival foods, and the painful memory of plantation slavery. In South Asia, sugar appears in sweets offered at weddings, temples, shops, and family celebrations, from syrup-soaked confections to milk-based desserts scented with cardamom. In the Middle East and North Africa, syrup, honey, nuts, pastry, and rosewater create sweets that carry older traditions of medicine, hospitality, and refinement. In Europe and the Americas, sugar fills cakes, jams, chocolate, tea, breakfast cereals, and holiday rituals. The smells gather around you like ghosts' caramel in a copper pan, molasses in a barrel, cane smoke over a field, beet pulp steaming in winter air, vanilla cake cooling near a window, peppermint candy in a paper twist, fruit jam bubbling on a stove. Sugar's history is not only written in records, it is stored in the body, in the way a certain dessert can make someone remember a grandmother's hands, a festival street, a school treat, a wedding table, or a difficult year made slightly gentler by one small sweet thing. A quirky tidbit sits on the dessert plate. In many cultures, sugar has been shaped into art that was never meant to last: wedding cakes with impossible tears, Day of the Dead sugar skulls, moulded candies, spun sugar nests, festival sweets painted with edible silver, and decorative sculptures made to be admired briefly, then eaten or broken. Sugar is one of humanity's favourite materials for temporary beauty. We build tiny monuments, then chew them. Honestly, that says quite a lot about us, yet the sweetness remains bitter-sweet. Sugar's past carries slavery, colonization, land theft, indenture, dangerous work, environmental damage, and unequal trade. It also carries resistance, migration, cultural creativity, nourishment, celebration, scientific invention, and survival. No single taste can hold all of that neatly, but sugar does hold it, whether or not the tongue knows. A spoonful can be comfort and consequence at once. You walk through a modern cane field at dawn. The sky is pink at the edges. Dew clings to the leaves. Some fields are harvested by machines that cut and load cane with roaring efficiency. In other places, workers still cut by hand, swinging blades through heat, dust, and sharp foliage. The air smells of grass, diesel, mud, and morning smoke. Sugar remains a labour story, even where machines dominate. People plant, manage, repair, transport, refine, package, sell, and clean up after the sweet machine. You move to a beet field under a colder sky. The soil is dark and heavy. Roots emerge from the earth, pale and blunt, as if sweetness has chosen a very modest disguise. Trucks carry them to factories where steam rises into grey air. Cane and beet, tropical grass and temperate root, meet in the same global market. Their crystals look alike, but their landscapes remember different weather. Historians still argue whether sugar should be understood mainly as a villain of empire, a driver of capitalism, a source of everyday pleasure, a public health concern, or a cultural treasure. The answer, inconveniently and accurately, is yes. Sugar is not one story. It is a bundle of stories tied together with trade, appetite, violence, science, and comfort. To make it too simple would be to let it escape too easily. You open an old family recipe book. The pages are stained at the edges, softened by steam and touch. Sugar appears everywhere: 1 cup, 2 spoons, a pinch, a syrup, a glaze, a dusting. No recipe says, add centuries of empire. No margin note says, stir in migration, chemistry, plantation labour, beet factories, rationing, and advertising. Yet all of it waits behind the measurements. The recipe looks domestic, but the ingredient is global. A festival begins somewhere outside your imagination's window. Lanterns glow. A vendor pours syrup over hot pastry. Children carry sweets in paper bags. Someone breaks a piece of candy and shares it. Someone refuses sugar for health reasons and is quietly heroic for about 8 minutes before reconsidering near the cake. The human relationship with sweetness is full of discipline, desire, guilt, joy, generosity, and negotiation. Sugar also teaches an uncomfortable lesson about pleasure. Something can bring real comfort and still have a troubling history. Something can be beloved and still deserve scrutiny. A sweet taste can calm a child, honour a guest, mark a holy day, preserve fruit, soothe bitterness, or help someone swallow medicine. It can also encourage systems that exploit land and labour, or habits that harm health when pushed into excess. The world is rarely kind enough to keep pleasure and harm in separate cupboards, so you return to the kitchen. The rain outside has slowed. The cup in your hand is warm. Sugar has dissolved completely, leaving only taste. You think of cane leaves hissing in trade winds, bees circling ancient trees, apothecaries scraping hard loaves, ports smelling of molasses, beet factories steaming in snow, ration books opening under blackout curtains, supermarket aisles glowing with fluorescent light. All of it has led, somehow, to this quiet sip. The sweet force that shaped the world is not finished. It continues in farms, policies, cravings, labels, recipes, and memories. But here, in the small circle of lamplight, it becomes still for a moment. You taste sweetness and bitterness together, and you let the knowledge settle gently, like sugar falling through tea. Now the room grows softer. The spoon rests beside the cup. The rain has become a hush against the glass, and the night folds itself around the kitchen with slow, dark kindness. You do not need to follow the ships any farther, or walk the fields, or count the barrels, or listen for the factory wheels. The story has given you its long road, and now it loosens its grip. The sugar bowl sits closed. The cup cools in your hands. Somewhere far away, cane leaves move under moonlight. Upbeat fields sleep beneath cloud, and old kitchens hold the scent of cakes that are only memories now. Let the sweetness fade into quiet. Let the bitterness soften at the edges. Let history become a low, warm murmur, drifting farther and farther away until all that remains is breath, darkness, and rest.